and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, recording in progress. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. We'll call to order the June 22nd, 2022 Select Board meeting to order. It's 5:30. There's no changes to the agenda that I'm aware of. Announcements, Libby?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and we have a special recognition of our retiring tax collector, Tricia Murphy. Trish has 28 years of service with the town. She's retiring at the end of the month. And Brian and I are going to say a couple of things, and then what we'd like to have the board members do, like back in the old days, is come around to the front, and Trish will come by and we can greet her, maybe without shaking, but fist bump or elbow, and then she'll get something at the end. So Trish, we really want to thank you for your service. In my time with the town, Trish has always been, she's moved up to the position of tax collector, and she's always been readily available for questions, answers, and really excellent service to the public. So thank you so much. Brian?
Thank you, Libby. I would be lying if I didn't say that I was sad that Tricia is retiring, and also happy for her to be able to enjoy not having to come in every day of the week and mail tax bills and do all of the fun things that the collector gets to do. I will say in the 8 years that I've been there, Tricia has been amazing to work with, an absolute pleasure. And over the last 3 years as the collector, it's been very comforting to know that you were down in that office, helping taxpayers, ensuring that things went out timely so that all the functions of government would continue to operate. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for everything that you've done in my 8 years here and for your 28 years of service to the town. And we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Side, please.
We should probably recognize Larry too, Tricia's husband, for, his small role. Thank you very much, you guys. Moving on with the announcements, there is no board meeting next week. The board is on its summer schedule, but meetings thereafter on July 6th and July 13th. That's all I have.
Thank you, Libby. Any select board announcements or comments before we get started tonight? No? There's no follow-up comment for prior select board meetings. Any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Any public? There it is. Is there anybody on their hand up there? Any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda?
Hello, everybody. I'm sure you all missed me.
Yes.
A week or two ago, I gave 7 copies of this wastewater management plan update to Mrs. Mooney to distribute to the selectmen, to the manager, and one for herself. This is the, I hope you read it. It's a well-written, very nicely printed, very good pictures. Nantucket Wastewater Management Plan Update. Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan Update Complete. It's from the Town of Nantucket Board of Selectmen, February 2016. And I just want to read a little bit from it. It's polluting of our water resources impacts us all. Nantucket depends on its water resources for drinking water, public health, tourism, fishing, boating, swimming, recreation, livelihoods, and sole source sustainability. These water resources help make Nantucket unique and special. And one more sentence. We are moving forward to implement this plan and need your support. The Board of Selectmen and Town Administration are committed to preserving and protecting Nantucket's water resources. The reason I'm here is I believe the administration has been more evasive of this paper than supportive. And in subsequent meetings, I will explain bit by bit how this comes about. Of course, the Nantucket scallop yield this winter was 3,000 bushels, which is the lowest ever, as opposed to, for instance, 100,000 bushels in 1980. So that's a decrease of roughly 97%. And if we look at the 100,000 bushels of 1980 and roughly compute how many pounds that was, and if I looked in my old log book, and figured the price, the Nantucket locals have been deprived of $30 million in 2021 dollars. And this works out quite well because there was about 600,000 earned, which is roughly a 30th of. So we're squandering this, and there are three main items. What is causing the pollution? And of course, the septic systems, the fertilizer, and the storm drains are the three that are addressed in this 2016. Of course, there's another one which is very important, and that is recreational vessels. And that was, for some reason, not included. Anybody who's spent any time in the water knows that's a very large source of pollution. We'll get to that after I discuss the first three. Tell me when my 3 minutes is up. What is causing the pollution? A major cause is nitrogen. Nitrogen in our septic systems, fertilizers, and storm water, and I will add, and our recreational vessels. And I still have seconds. I will leave my seconds, and I'll see you next selectmen's meeting, and we'll discuss septic systems, what has been done, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Thank you for sending that information ahead so we'd be prepared. Appreciate it. Any other public comment tonight, remotely or here, to discuss that's not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, Public Health Department, monthly COVID report update.
Good evening. So real quick, we are in pretty good shape. We're continue doing the wastewater reports every 2 weeks now, which is a really important part to understand. We did see a slight raise, but we're now on par with where we were. We have, like I said last time, we have entered the endemic stage, and we're going to be seeing cases. The good news is, barring any new variant, knock on wood, barring any new variants, we should be treating this now like we did the flu. We haven't been seeing hospitalizations. We haven't been seeing increased morbidity in any of it, just positivity. That's really what we're seeing. The vaccine for children ages 5 and below was recently approved this week. So the vaccine clinics that we are running as of right now do not offer those. They are hoping that that gets coordinated through their local pediatricians, their local primary care, mainly because of the risk that comes with dosing a child. And then we are continuing the vaccine clinics. The next one is this weekend. I believe that one has already been sold out. So continue going to the town website, to the COVID page, and that's where you can sign up for next month's clinic. And with that, I'll call it.
Any questions or comments?
Roberto, do you have any way to assess unmet demand for vaccines that might necessitate doing more frequent clinics?
Unfortunately, no, because of the dynamic population we have right now, especially in the summer. Coming into the fall, possibly a little bit more. I am working with Martha's Vineyard health departments as well. We're coordinating a group from the state to be able to come down and do clinics in the schools come the fall. We're still waiting to hear back from the state on that before I even let Beth know. So Beth, if you're watching, expect that email. But for the summer, there is no way to assess unmet demand right now.
Okay, thanks.
Roberto, on the way over here on NPR, I heard Moderna is coming out with a better vaccine that covers more variants. Do you think that's heading that direction? Better vaccines are different, or is it just kind of going to be the same?
At this point, I wouldn't venture a guess to say better vaccines. Yeah. Definitely different approaches. The mRNA vaccine technology has matured. So they will be changing the ways that we have to store it, how they get shipped, how long the life it's for. We have more data on waning immunity. So I don't know about better, but definitely different.
I think it'll be similar to the flu vaccines,
yes,
where it changes every couple of years with.
That's the working hypothesis right now, that it'll be more like the flu, where coming into the fall, coming into the summer, we will be looking at what happens in the southern hemisphere, and then they will look at what's happening here in the northern hemisphere, and we will be creating what strain to have the dose for that following year, just like the flu.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
I think we're going to go. We're going to take this from a monthly COVID just to as needed instead of having it on there. So it could be. Hopefully, it's not every week. Hopefully, we don't have to have that at all. Okay, there's no new business that I know of. Approval of minutes for June 8th. Approval of payroll warrants for June 12th. And approval of treasury warrants for June 15th and June 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. Approval of pending contracts. Any questions for Libby? Any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is that aye, Matt, for
Aye,
pending
yeah.
contracts? Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Citizen Department Committee request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 10 p.m. to 10:30 for a wedding to be held Saturday, June 23rd, 17 Holbert Ave. Do you have any questions on that? All right, Erica, do you want to?
No, I was just going to say that Jimmy Jasic is online and Susie Spring is here if you have any questions.
I have no questions. I'm happy to make a motion to approve.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay, that passes 5-0.
No, I was a no.
Oh, you said no. I'm sorry. You said aye. Yeah, so that is 4-1. Thank you, Jimmy. Nantucket Preservation Trust request for approval of historic preservation restriction to be held by Nantucket Preservation Trust for property located at 55 Union Street. I believe this is the second. Is it the second part, Erica? We've done.
Yep, you've already done the preliminary review. Town council has reviewed this, issued its report. It's been found to be in fine legal form, and you just need to, if you so choose, vote to approve it and find it in the public interest.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve and find it in the public interest. It's a beautiful building, and they did a great job.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Okay, Finance Department request for approval of sale of $37,822,200 in general obligation bonds. I will not read the rest. It's a lot of numbers. Brian's here to walk us through it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before you have a request, we recently sold 37 million, little over 37 million in general obligation bond anticipation notes to fund a variety of projects, which this time I did include the entire list for the tax exempt series. There was a taxable series of 4.3 million, which was solely related to the Affordable Housing Trust and funding 31 fairgrounds. We've made it taxable because bond counsel is still in the review of the original mortgage and grant agreements to determine the amount that we ultimately be able to sell on a tax exempt basis. And we did sell $875,000 in grant anticipation note to cover Chapter 90 work that we're still waiting for reimbursement from the Commonwealth on, which we expect. But if we go past June 30th, having the grant anticipation note allows us to cover any deficits from that while we wait for their reimbursement. As outlined, this is actually probably one of the fewest bids that we received on all of the debt that we sold. I think it's partially because of the rising interest rate environment. So as I noted here, we had two bids for the tax exempt offering and one for the taxable offering. We're approaching rates that we actually haven't seen, I think, since the time I started here in terms of what our net interest cost was. 1.8404 for the tax exempt was right around 75 to 100 basis points higher than the last sale that we had. The taxable was 3.5%, which is getting much higher on a coupon rate than we've seen recently. And the grant anticipation note was also at 3.5. The treasurer and I both remarked that that's the highest we've ever seen grant anticipation notes at in first purchase or for offerings when we put them out to bid. So we're definitely feeling the uncertainty in the market right now. So, but we would ask, I think Erica has the vote bond counsel sent to us. So we'd ask and request favorable action on the sale.
Can I make a motion to approve based on the motion that's in our packet?
Dated today.
Dated today.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
Brian.
Brian, and the goal was to get it now because it's going up even more.
It
That's
is. So
correct?
the bond anticipation notes are dated through October, and we're in the midst right now of doing an extremely large permanent offering to try to get in before the Fed meets in July to try to lock a rate in before the next rate increase. We expect it's going to be higher, but we're hoping we can maybe save a little bit in the terms of that sale. So
Right.
yes.
Right, yeah, that's what I figured. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, Kamal McCarthy. Dr. McCarthy, update on current activities. Is he here?
Mr. Chairman?
He's online.
I think he's online, and I just wanted to mention a couple things.
Oh, there he is.
Just to mention, Kamal has been very busy, and the items that are listed in the, it'll get onto the screen, the packet are the main things that he's been working on, but I want to mention that he is going to understate what he's been working on because he just does that. But we're really proud of the work that he's doing, and there's a lot going on here, a lot more than even I think we ever imagined would be happening before we established the position and even after we hired him to fill it. So there's just, and I want to really just mention that Kamal has been very involved in the Mass Municipal, Kamal, you'll have to correct me what it's called, the state's DEI coalition. There's a group of DEI directors or whatever those positions are called in other municipalities that is started to grow and get together and talk about DEI issues, policies, procedures, best practices, all of that kind of thing. And Kamal got in on it on the ground floor, and that group has been working on a guide, which Kamal, you can go over. And Nantucket is specifically one of the DEI, Kamal himself is specifically one of the practitioners that has contributed to the guide. So we really, it's something to be very proud of. So Kamal, I'll turn it over to you.
Libby, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you attending the recent Juneteenth event that I did. Ladies and gentlemen of the Select Board, thank you for having me, audience members. I'm just going to quickly review the one-page summary that I submitted for today's meeting. Surprisingly, I have 2 pages of things to say. I don't know how that happened, but bear with me and we'll get through this real quickly. So our DEI consultation with tangible development is still ongoing. Members of the town, sorry, this is me getting nervous and not liking to do this stuff, but hold on. So members of the town employees have started a DEI internal committee. And all the participants have undergone DEI capacity training, and our first meeting is scheduled for next week. Phase 1 of the assessment phase, which is what the consultants are working on now, is almost complete. And we have a review meeting scheduled for August. Looking ahead still with the strategic plan, phase 2 is going to be the strategic development phase. And we will start later this summer or sometime in early fall. And this is going to include things like envisioning an inclusive organization, and we will develop our specific DEI goals. We will plan for the implementation process, and we'll also develop DEI metrics that are specific to Nantucket. Phase 3 is the final phase, and that is the education phase of the consultation. The consultants are going to design an education program, again, that is specific to Nantucket, and we're going to use it as a training tool for new hires, town committee members, and any willing community members on various DEI topics. And our DEI consultation is contracted to be completed in early 2023. Moving on to the Massachusetts DEI Coalition, which the town manager was just addressing. The Massachusetts Municipal DEI Coalition has created a DEI guide as reported. And the goal is that it is tailored towards towns and cities across the state on how to develop their own DEI offices or positions. As you are aware, Nantucket is a member of the coalition, and I'm happy to share that I participated in the guide process, as the town manager already did. Thank you. And you can specifically find that Nantucket is listed under who created this guide, and the actual job description, so before I was hired, is also a part of the guide as well. The guide was developed and supported by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and it is available on their website. Moving on to calling all whalers, item C. In my last update to the board, I mentioned that the town has started a new initiative aimed at creating a retention and recruitment program. Calling All Whalers is the brainchild of the town manager, and the DEI office and the HR department are spearheading the initiative. Video clips with whalers from the class of 2005 have already been collected. And the next phase of this process is for the public outreach manager will put the clips together to create almost a 1-minute advertisement, encouraging people to apply for town jobs. And the ad will be on the town website and most likely shared with local media. Moving on to item D, Juneteenth. Last Sunday was Juneteenth. The holiday recognizes the end of slavery in the United States in 1865, which was 2 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. There were a variety of events on island, including that included the significance of Juneteenth. For example, the Athenaeum hosted a movie event. The Nantucket Equity Advocates, and Brooke, feel free to comment further on this. They hosted a tour of the historic Colored Cemetery with Dr. Francis Cartoonan. There was a lecture inside the African Meeting House with Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson, and they also hosted a social gathering as well. And it was my personal pleasure, to present my research findings from my dissertation on behalf of not only the DEI office, but the Culture and Tourism Department and the Museum of African American History. Now, there is an item E that is not on your list, so just give me a couple more seconds. I just wanted to share some of the other activities that the office is working on. DEI Conversations is under development. I'm working with the sewer department specifically to create a framework for departments to have conversations on various DEI topics. So we had our first departmental talk in April of this year, and the next one is scheduled for August. We're bringing back the Lunch and Learn series this summer, or maybe early fall. I'm planning to do a training with the deputy directors and middle managers on Stephen Young's book on micro messaging, Why Great Leadership is Beyond Words. And this workshop has already been tested and introduced last summer with department heads. And lastly, the one other thing that I'd like to just mention really quickly is that just random opportunities that's come across the DEI office desk. Sometime next week, apparently I'm meeting with the Dean of Liberal Arts from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And I know the town manager will join me if she has the availability in our schedule. I'm not sure what the meeting is about, but I think the goal is, or my goal anyways, is to discuss if and how UMass can bring higher education opportunities, specifically on island, to its residents as well too. So those are the things that I wanted to review today, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Very excellent report. You can tell me about that meeting I'm supposed to go to later.
Because you'd say no. You're too busy.
Now I can't say no, obviously. Good strategy.
Smart move, yep. Thank you, Kamal. Okay, next up, we have a joint meeting with the planning board to introduce candidates pursuant to select board committee appointments policy, joint vote on appointment to fill one planning board vacancy. I think you guys are going to call to order.
Yes, I'd like to call to order a meeting of the planning board and also the select board for the purpose of filling the vacancy for the planning board. And I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous.
Okay, planning board is open. Okay, next up is, will you write? Is that?
Okay,
Erica?
so in accordance with our committee policy that was adopted last year, well, actually, no, that's the other stuff. This is the planning board vacancy. Everybody has paper ballots in their hands. Everybody's going to put their name on their paper ballot, write the planning board on there, and then their candidate. You are voting on, you've got 4 different applicants: Joe Topham, Emily Kilbert, Jeremy Bloomer, and Campbell Sutton. But actually, before you vote, they have an opportunity to speak on their applications and introduce themselves. So if anyone is here and wants to speak on their application, and then you can pass your votes to me, and you're welcome to ask any of the candidates questions.
Okay, would any candidates like to speak tonight? Sure, come on up.
Hi, I'm Emmy Kilvert, and I've applied for the vacant seat on the planning board because I love Nantucket. I believe in sustainable, balanced growth for this island. I have a lot to contribute to the planning board and the experience and skills to do so. I understand the complexity of property rights. I know that much work involves ensuring plans fall within the zoning laws, and approving them when they do. I own a commercial building in the Mid-Island area that includes 2 apartments and 5 commercial units. I have experience managing tenants. I know the importance of the effects on traffic patterns and parking, and the need for strategic planning for areas such as the Mid-Island commercial area around Stop and Shop. I have direct understanding of the importance of having accurate plans. My husband and I have owned and operated Nantucket Insurance since 1987. As a result, I have an in-depth knowledge of the many different neighborhoods here and the complex issues they face. I've been the chair for 2 years of the committee at Nantucket Yacht Club tasked with master planning to protect our buildings, grounds, and waterfront from rising seas. This is a very complex planning process, which includes waterfront design, legal, contracts, environmental, Chapter 91, construction, and public relations. As you all are aware, I am the only applicant for the planning board vacancy who ran in the recent election. I earned 913 votes for the 3-year seat, plus another 110 plus votes written in for the 5-year seat. I knew running a write-in campaign would be a daunting task, requiring effort, time, energy, and expense. But I believed the public should have a choice of candidates. I decided to run as a write-in candidate, especially after the announced and expected challenger did not return his nomination papers. Despite the challenges of a write-in campaign, I earned more votes than any write-in candidate on Nantucket in modern memory. I also believe more diverse boards make better decisions, and I would provide a woman's perspective. The planning board benefited greatly from the vision and strength of character of Judith Wagner, and I would do my best to walk in her footsteps. I would appreciate your vote today, as would all the people who voted for me. I will be running next spring for the seat on the planning board and would like to have the remainder of this term to work hard for Nantucket and educate myself and gain experience. I hope you will respect the commitment I showed to actually run a campaign and respect the will of the many Nantucket citizens who voted for me and appoint me to the planning board today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions for me? Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak tonight? Any other candidates?
Good evening. I'm Joseph Topham. I have over 30 years experience of Nantucket working in the architectural industry. I've worked with every board. I've gone before them. I filled out applications. I think the only board I haven't gone to is the sign committee. So in 1997, I started Nantucket roller hockey with 4 friends. We purchased a containment rink, and when we were done purchasing that rink, we gave it to the Park and Recs as a gift. From there, I transitioned to Nantucket Ice, where I was on the board for 6 years. While I was there, I started Nantucket Youth Hockey with a group of friends that I played roller hockey with. We started the whole entire basic mission statement for the youth hockey, and we even started to start the groundwork for working with the MIAA and having that established. And I'm happy that 20 years later that the rink is still going. In 2014, I was started working on the Matica Admiralty Scholarship Committee. A group of 9 men give anywhere from 18 to 24 Nantucket students, either in the Marine academies or doing something in ecology, or if a parent is a member, we give scholarship money to them. I've been very proud of that. In 2015, I was nominated to the Concom. I was on that board for 6 years. The only reason I got off of that was because it was the last year of my daughters being on the island before they left for school, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with them. One of the benefits of being on the Concom was that it was on the CPC. And as a Nantucket native, I loved being able to gift money or give money to, the Nantucket Hospital or the thrift shop or one of the churches or someone that would be able to do a restoration or rebuild some of their properties. And I found that really interesting. The amount of documents we would get and the history on the buildings and when they were renovated, I found fascinating. And I enjoyed working with Ken Bogran and the rest of the group. It was really an important time, I felt, as a native, being able to do that. The other part was in 2017, I was on the Tacoma Green Committee, where we reviewed 3 applications for 3 possible builders. I'm happy that Hakeem has come forward, but they are still working on some issues that we need to work on, but I feel like the town will figure that out very quickly. I have no ties to any local groups. I'm here for Nantucket. Nantucket first. I'm a Nantucket native. That's what it's about. I don't care about any group or anything or cocktail circuit. It's about Nantucket. And I felt when I was on the Concom, I didn't care who the applicant was. I didn't care who the attorney was. It was about the project before us. It was about the rules, the regs. That's what it's about. Not making up my own guidelines, rules, making a silly interpretation. If we had a question, we brought in town council. That was what it was all about. And as far as not submitting my paperwork for the planning board, in between the time I pulled the papers, by the time I was supposed to submit the papers, I had a significant knee injury and back injury. We're just going to leave it at that. So I really wanted to run, but I just couldn't be able to do that. So I was just in a health state that I just couldn't get the necessary votes that I wanted and signatures. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Any other candidates here tonight like to speak?
Let's see anyone. Let me just check online.
Okay,
One thing I didn't know was just that this is to fill a vacancy to the next annual town election, which will be in 2023. That actually is when this seat is up as well. So then if this person wants to run again, they would run for a full 5-year seat after that.
Okay, are you ready for a vote? Okay, remember, planning board, your vote, and your name. Don't forget your name. And Eric, can you give us a little history on this whole yes or no?
So
paper?
we are trying to be really good and use up some scrap paper from the town building. Those originate, is my understanding, from old town meetings where you would hold up your yes or no vote. We have tons of them, so I'm trying to put them to good use.
I can say yes or no. If I like something, I can, or don't tonight, I can. Okay.
Okay, so I will read out the votes and who made them. Jason Bridges cast his vote for Joe Topham, Don Holgate for Joe Topham, Matt Fee for Emmy Kilbert, Brooke Moore for Joe Topham, Melissa Murphy for Emmy Kilbert, John Trudell for Campbell Sutton, David Iverson for Joe Topham, Matt Lowell for Joe Topham, Barry Rector for Joe Topham. So Joe Topham has it with 6 votes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone who put their name in.
Be sure to go to the town clerk and get signed in before your first official meeting, please.
Yes. Yep. Please go ahead. Yep, thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay, we're on to annual select board committee appointments. It's 2022 annual board committees, commission appointments. So I thought what we would do is due by acclamation. I'll read off all the board, committees, commissions that are not contested, and we can vote all those in at once, if everybody's fine with that. Is everybody fine with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we have, well, there's two that nobody applied for, and that's the Contract Review Committee and Agricultural Commission, so those won't, there's no, nobody put their hat in the ring for those.
And HDC associate.
Which one?
HDC associate.
Okay, and that one was also, nobody put their hat in the ring. Okay, so we'd be voting by acclamation for Capital Program Committee, Cemetery Commission, Committee for Council on Human Services, Cultural Council, FinCom, Real Estate Assessment Committee, Roads and Right-of-Way, Scholarship Committee, and ZBA. Is there a vote to?
So moved.
Second.
Pushing those through? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that what you need there, Erica, for those?
Yeah. Thank you.
Is that what you need, Erica, for that one? Yeah. Is it good? Okay. All right, the first one up is Airport Commission. We have one seat available, two applicants, Jeanette Topham and Walter Flaherty. Make sure to write airport or airport commissioner or something at the top. And your name.
Oopsie. We could do a workout now.
Thank you. Okay. Jason Bridges voted for Mrs. Topham, Don Holgate, Mrs. Topham, Matt Fee, Mrs. Topham, Brooke Moore, Mr. Flaherty, and Melissa Murphy, Mrs. Topham. So Mrs. Topham gets that seat.
Okay, the next one is Board of Health. I'm going to recuse from this. I have a conflict with one of the applicants. One of the applicants is on the board that I work at. So that would be a conflict. So I will not be voting.
Before you recuse, did you want to?
Do I need to step out or do I not vote?
You can say those words from there if you want.
What's that?
You were going to say something about someone.
One of the retiring members.
Oh, yes, sorry. Excuse me, sorry. So Libby did ask me to talk about Malcolm Mcnabb. He is stepping away. He's not reapplying. Mr. Mcnabb, Dr. Mcnabb was on the Board of Health when it first was started. He's been on it for, I believe, 11 years. And we want to say thank you.
Yeah.
13.
2011.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, 13 years.
When it was first established.
So we want to say thank you to Malcolm for his service. Did you want to say anything, Melissa?
I just want to echo that thanks. We had a very nice last public meeting with Dr. Mcnabb, and these past 2 years during the pandemic, the Board of Health had to have very in-depth and substantive conversations and make a lot of difficult decisions for the community. And Dr. Mcnabb was consistently a leader, and even though I personally didn't always agree with him, we could disagree and amicably, and he's a real asset to our community. He does promise that he will continue attending from time to time. So thank you, Dr. Mcnabb, if you're watching.
Thank you. Do I need to step away or am I just not voting?
Do you want me to read the names?
Yeah. Libby?
I was just gonna say, it's often best to just step away, but.
Sure.
it-
Okay.
Okay, so for the one seat, there are 4 applicants: Ann Smith, Carrie McKenna, Allison Bold, and Richard Ray.
Don Holgate voted for Allison Bold. Matt Fee for Richard Ray. Brooke Moore and Melissa Murphy both voted for for Carrie McKenna. Carrie McKenna gets that vote.
Thank you, Don.
Next, you have REAC. I'm sorry, CRAC.
Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. We have 3 seats available, 4 applicants: Mary Longacre, Sarah Boyce, Joanna Roach, and Stephen Weinbach.
You can do one piece of paper with each. One question is, how did you want to break up the seats? Because it's 3 different terms. Or you can leave it to town administration to decide that with whoever you vote in. Or you can do it yourself.
Do you want us to write in
I think we just write.
the terms?
Is that going to be?
I think that's going to be confusing. I
That's
think it's
gonna
going to be different. Why don't we, you know what we can do is see who gets it first, and then we can discuss terms.
Okay.
If you want to make that decision.
Are we all fine with that?
Yeah, if there's a clear top look at it, give them the longer term, yeah. I'm fine with you guys working it out.
And just so everybody knows, this is because CRAC has been made a full-time committee, and so we're establishing these 3 seats in a staggered years to make it easier for the future.
So Matt, were you saying that once we know the votes, then we could decide together which?
I'm fine with, Erica or staff doing it.
Okay.
If there's a clear vote winner, put them in for the longer term,
Yeah.
let them figure it out.
And the applicants may have a preference to a longer or shorter term
Right.
as well, so.
Yep.
Okay, Jason Bridges voted for Mary Longacre, Sarah Boyes, and Joanna Roach. Don Holgate voted for Mary Longacre, Joanna Roach, and Steve Leimbach. And then Matt Fee, Brooke Moore, and Melissa Murphy each voted for Mary Longacre, Sarah Boyes, and Joanna Roach. So it would be Mary, Sarah, and Joanna. And then you could decide on terms. Or are you leaving it up to me?
I think we're going to leave it up to you. You're all set.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to do that.
Okay. Next up is Concom.
Okay, next up is Conservation Commission. We have 3 seats available, 8 applicants. Marcia Brown, Maureen Phillips, South Engelberg, Michael Mazzarelli, Joe Plandowski, Bert Balkine, Tim Brain, and Jennifer Porter.
And you are voting for 3.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm putting it on my tally sheet because it's easier for me to remember all the votes. Okay. Jason Bridges voted for Mike Mizzarelli, Joe Plandowski, and Tim Breen. Don Holgate voted for Marcia Brown, Mike Mizzarelli, and Tim Breen. Matt Fee voted for Seth Engelberg, Joe Plandowski, and Tim Breen. And then Brooke Moore and Melissa Murphy both voted for Seth Engelberg, Mike Mizzarelli, and Joe Plandowski. So that is, let me just count it up. I should have done that first. You've got a tie on one. So you've got Mike Mizzarelli with 4 votes, Joe Plandowski with 4 votes. So you need another vote between Seth Engelberg and Tim Breen.
Could you please read them again, Erica?
Jason was Mizzarelli, Plandowski, and Breen. Holgate was Brown, Mizzarelli, and Breen. Fee was Engelberg, Plandowski, Breen. And then Moore and Murphy were Engelberg, Mizzarelli, and Plandowski.
So 2 were through.
So 2 went through, Michael Mizzarelli and Joe Plandowski, and then Seth Engelberg and Tim Breen. It was a tie with 3 votes each. So you're going to need to do a tiebreaker vote. And you can, yeah, we needed a third vote for another vote for the 3rd seat.
We're voting for just one of those 2 people, or we're voting for, again, for anybody in the,
That's a good question.
I don't know if we ever, it makes sense that you would vote for just the 2.
I would assume it would be between the 2.
We've usually done the 2.
What's that?
I think we've usually just done
Yeah.
the highest candidates.
I think so too.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, you were waiting on me.
We were waiting on you.
Take your time.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Okay. Jason Bridges cast his vote for Tim Breen. Don Holgate cast her vote for Tim Breen. And then Matt Fee, Brooke Moore, and Melissa Murphy cast their vote for Seth Engelberg. Seth is the 3rd seat.
Thank you, Erica.
Welcome.
We're going to move on to, I believe, it's Council on Aging. But I want to say, I'm going to ask you, Council for Human Services, there was 4 seats, 3 applicants. Was somebody else applying later? They missed it? Is it one, or is there just an open seat? That's okay if you don't have that. I'll just.
Let me just see what I put in the packet. I made an edited version for myself. So I think I had said on.
It's my old seat that's vacant.
So it's still open?
Yep.
There was a couple that people had
No,
applied later.
Yeah, there's mainly, it is your old seat, but then there's more applicants. There was one more Council for Human Services application that came in after the deadline.
That's what I was asking.
Yes.
So we can do, that'll happen later.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Council on Aging, 4 seats available, 5 applicants: Kendra Lockley, Arlene O'Reilly, Bob Guvari, Allison Forsgrain, and Laura Holden. So we're picking 4 out of those 5. We got one more.
I went to just last names to save myself some time.
Okay, Mr. Bridges, Jason Bridges voted for Kendra Lockley, Arlene O'Reilly, Bob, how do we say his last name? Kacharvi, thank you. And Allison Forsgren. Don Holgate voted for Kendra Lockley, Arlene O'Reilly, Allison Forsgren, Laura Holden. Nat Fee voted for Kendra Lockley, Arlene O'Reilly, Allison Forsgren, Laura Holden. Brooke Moore voted for Kendra Lockley, Bob Kakarvi. That was a jumble, sorry. Allison Forsgren and Laura Holden. Melissa Murphy voted for Kendra Lockley, Arlene O'Reilly, Bob Kakarvi, and Allison Forsgren. So that leaves Lockley with 5 votes, O'Reilly with 4 votes, Kakarvi with 3 votes, Forsgren with 5, and Holden with 4. So you're gonna need to do another tiebreaker between Holden and Kakarvi. Okay, Jason Bridges voted for, how do you say it again?
Kacharvi?
Kacharvi.
I am so sorry.
Yes.
For Mr. Kacharvi, thank you. Don Holgate voted for Laura Holden, Matt Fee, Laura Holden, Brooke Moore, and Melissa Murphy, Kacharvi. So Mr. Kacharvi has it.
Okay, I think we're on to Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust. 4 seats available, 6 applicants. Chantal Boyce, Brian Sullivan, Arlene O'Reilly, Jennifer Porter, Meg Browers, and Rima Sherry. Is it fast over there?
I might put initials.
Yeah.
Who writes anymore?
Okay. Jason Bridges voted for Chantal Blois, Brian Sullivan, Meg Browers, Rima Sherry. Don Holgate voted for Chantal Blois, Brian Sullivan, Arlene Riley, and Rima Sherry. Matt Fee voted for Chantal Blois, Brian Sullivan, Jennifer Porter, Rima Sherry. Brooke Moore voted for Chantal Blois, Brian Murphy, Meg Browers, Rima Sherry. And Melissa Murphy voted for Chantal Blois, Brian Sullivan, Arlene O'Reilly, and Rima Sherry. So Blois has 5, Sullivan has 5, Sherry has 5, and then it goes to Meg Browers with 2 votes. O'Reilly and Porter each received 1.
Can you check that?
Did I get it wrong?
Did you say Arlene? Yeah, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Arlene got 2.
Yeah, I think it's.
I missed
it's
that.
A vote off.
It's another break.
Yeah.
It's another tiebreaker between O'Reilly and Browers. Sorry. Thank you. I'm off my game tonight. Okay. Jason voted for Meg Browers. Don voted for Arlene O'Reilly. Matt voted for Meg Browers. Brooke voted for Meg Browers. Melissa voted for Arlene O'Reilly. That is 3-2 for Meg Browers.
Thank you. I believe next up is the Nantucket Historical Commission. 2 seats available, 4 applicants. Linda Williams, Abby DeMolina, Clement Dirks, I said it wrong last time, Dirkes, and Hillary Rayport.
Jason Bridges voted for Abby De Molina and Clement Durkes. Don Holgate voted for Linda Williams and Abby De Molina. Matt Fee voted for Clement Durkes and Hillary Rayport. Brooke Moore voted for Abby De Molina and Clement Durkes. Melissa Murphy voted for Abby De Molina and Clement Durkes. So that's 4 votes for De Molina, 4 votes for Durkes. Williams and Rayport each got 1.
Thank you. I think our last one is Planning Board alternate. 1 seat available, 3 applicants, Abby De Molina, Elizabeth O'Rourke, and Campbell Sutton.
Jason Bridges voted for Abby De Molina. Don Holgate voted for Abby De Molina. Matt Fee voted for Campbell Sutton. Brooke Moore voted for Elizabeth O'Rourke. Melissa Murphy voted for Abby De Molina. That's 3 votes for De Molina, who gets that seat.
I believe that's it, Erica.
Yeah, and I would just note that I am going to tally all or put out something for all the vacant seats that are still there. We'll put something in the newspaper, something online, and we'll have our so-called round 2 later this summer to fill hopefully the remaining vacant seats.
FinCom is one of those, right?
Correct.
Isn't it? Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
One seat, yep.
Yeah, good. Okay, we're going to move on to real estate items. Request for approval and execution of purchase and sale agreement, quitclaim deed. This is for Hawthorne Street. Ken, you going to take us through these? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it not working?
I can hear you fine. I'm not. Just, can you hit it? Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. This is pretty straightforward. This is a yard sale program. What's involved here is the disposition under the yard sale program. It's parcel 3. The compensation is $5,000 and it's for 2,000 square feet. There are 3 properties that abut the road at this section. Tonight you're having applications with respect to 2 of them. The 3rd one will be coming next month. The documentation has been reviewed by town council, and I've also had it reviewed by Vince Murphy on behalf of Coastal Resiliency. There are no issues there. And so it is my recommendation that we proceed forward to execute the purchase and sale and move forward with the disposition of this particular property.
Is this connected to number 2 as well? Are they both?
It is. Number two is you can do it at the same time. Number 2 is parcel 4. If you want.
I'm sorry, Erica's saying no. One at a time?
One at a time.
I just didn't know
I
if
mean, you
there's
can
any-
review them together,
I
but
don't know if there's any
different
context
votes.
to
No,
talk about both of them.
there's no difference with respect to it. The fact is that parcel 2 is a slightly larger parcel, and therefore the price is greater, and the amount of acreage is slightly greater. So it's about 2,000 square feet in parcel. This one, it's about 4,000 square feet in the other, and that's the price differentiation is as recommended by the town assessor and as approved by REAC at their meeting earlier this week.
Okay, so we'll do the first one. Is there any questions on that?
Happy to make a motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That
And with
passes
respect to
unanimously.
parcel 4.
Yep, and then number 2?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously.
The third item is fairly straightforward as well. At the last meeting, we approved the release of an easement on Hancock Street. What transpired is between the time that we executed the easement and before the easement was recorded, the lawyer had given us the wrong name for the owner. So what they've done is he's given us the new name for the owner. Vicky March has reviewed it, and the release is exactly the same as done before. It's a confirmatory release, and the only difference is that the correct name of one of the two owners is in this new release that we're asking you to execute.
Just a clarification, we had this happen one time where an owner put the parcel in a different name and then was able to claim it was subdividable. There's nothing like that going on here.
Nothing whatsoever.
Okay.
It was just a mistake.
Yeah, okay.
And this is an easement, in fact. So it's an easement across the property, and it's not going to be able to create any subdividable capacity in the property whatsoever.
Right, it seemed like that. I just
Yeah.
want to put
No,
that on
it's
the
a fair-
record
it's fair-
and be
it's a fair-
sure.
It's a fair comment.
Yeah.
Okay, pleasure of the board.
Move approval?
Second.
Do you have a comment?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passed unanimously.
That's it for me today.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, public hearings. We'll open the public hearing to consider utility petition from Nantucket Electric Company, National Grid. This is for 13 Parker Lane. Erica, do we have somebody online?
We have Jose Vasquez from National Grid. And I just wanted to know, I know we usually do these together and we just did some of these at our last meeting. One of the affected owners here, this is a covenant lot, and we just didn't want her to wait so long to have to get her paperwork in place.
Okay, great. Is there any questions for Jose?
Jose, did you want to review this? Are you on? I see.
Yes, good evening. Yep, I'm here. Good evening, board. Good evening, residents. Yeah, so what we're petitioning is to install conduit from an existing pole, number 4 across the street, to the residents of number 13 Parker Lane, to provide them electrical service. So it's going to be about 50 feet of conduit going across the street.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Vasquez? Comments? Okay, is there a motion?
Do you want a motion to close the public hearing?
Oh, yes. Well,
moved.
Don's usually mine.
Second.
All those in favor to close the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Okay, we'll open public hearing to consider amending Chapter 367 taxi cabs. This is to remove the requirements for Massachusetts driver's license. And I believe we had spoke about this once before. Would you like to speak? Sure. Erica, you're keeping an eye on those. Or any hands go up.
Attendees,
Okay.
yep.
Hi, my name is David Larrabee from Cranberry Transportation. I'm here to represent Kenneth Turgeon, the petitioner of this, who is also the owner-operator of Cranberry Transportation and All Point Taxi, Inc. First thing, because of phone calls I got, I'd like to point out that this has nothing to do with assisting any rideshare companies such as Uber or Lyft or any such entities. It is currently a request for current locally owned companies. As we are well aware, the amount of visitors to this island has grown immensely over the recent years, and with that, so has the need for transportation. With only X amount of taxi, livery, charter, and limo license companies in Nantucket servicing this growing transportation need, we're not asking for an increase or decrease of any of those. What we're asking for is the town, along with the Nantucket Police Department, who together oversee the licensing and permitting process, change the regulations to allow drivers with out-of-state driver's license the ability to hold a taxi, tour, or limo driver permit. There is a system in place to apply for these permits. It requires an applicant to go to the Nantucket Police Department to apply for a permit, pay any and all fees, submit fingerprints for a federal background check in order to receive approval. The way the regulations read now, in order to do that, the applicant must hold a valid Massachusetts driver's license. Most seasonal workers are only here for a short period of time in order to just make some money and they go home. They either cannot or prefer not to go through the process of giving up their driver's license from other states for such a short period of time. This is to allow people who hold a driver's license within the United States only. Now, the reason for the request for this change is that transportation companies who are servicing this town are being held back from the ability to employ anyone without a Massachusetts driver's license. Therefore, seats are being left empty and vehicles are sitting idle and not providing the services that are intended for. We as local transportation companies spend lots of money in insurance, registrations, licensing, and whatnot to operate. If we can't fill those seats, that's a direct financial loss. The town has allowed rideshare companies to come here and operate at will. They are not forced to abide by the same rules as the local tax-paying companies. All taxi companies received an email last week from the Nantucket Police Department reminding them that spot checks will be performed, as they always have, and to be sure that they are conforming in any and all regulations, and they will be cited on the spot. That is not the problem and is welcomed. But when you have other companies just going to the beat of their own drum, it's hard to compete. With the ability for drivers without Massachusetts driver's licenses to get a permit to drive for our companies will help the town, visitors, and local taxpayers in a big way. Now that we have that's my last finale, but now that we're in the full summer mode of the Independence Day a week away, if this is to pass, just curious if we could get this passed immediately or retro to the actual submission. Thank you for the time. I'll welcome questions if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Larrabee. Any comments or questions? Erica, you got a...
Oh, I was just going to say we wouldn't retroactively do the effective date. We have to advertise them. So the earliest it would be next Thursday.
Okay. Any comments or questions? This is a public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Matt?
Yeah, do we have a recommendation from the police on this, number one? And number two, is this just US licenses, not foreign licenses? Okay, gotcha. All right, cool.
They had no comment, no objection.
Okay, good.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0.
And so Erica, could you just clarify what the activation date would be?
So because it's a regulation change, we're required to advertise that for 1 week.
Okay.
So I could technically put the effective date as next Thursday, which is what day is it? 30th?
30th. Okay. Great. So still in time before the Independence Day holiday. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Board of Public Works. It's a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 220, Biodegradable Packaging Regulations, including removal of exemptions for durable plastics, takeout containers, language clarifications.
So, Mr. Chair, we reviewed these proposed amendments with the board back in February, and now this is the public hearing following that. It was still a little bit delayed because of other priorities going on. We've got the public health director here, and our recycling coordinator is, I believe, an attendee online. It's pretty much all explained in the agenda item summary, but basically the biodegradable packaging regulations have been around since Roberto 1990, 1991, something like that. They're pretty dated. And since then, we've approved at town meeting the plastics ban. So certain plastic materials are now banned. So the effort was made to reconcile the biodegradable packaging regulations with the plastics ban and clarify some wording that wasn't very clear. So these amendments also go along with and connect directly to the board's strategic plan. You have a focus area of environmental leadership and an aspirational statement. Just quickly, I'll read it. Nantucket residents and visitors share responsibility for the long-term sustainability of our beautiful island. We recognize our stewardship of the land, air, and water, and work to ensure our community is resilient and self-sufficient. Other communities look to Nantucket to learn how to care for the natural environment. You have a goal with this focus area. Provide data-driven recommendations on island-wide solid waste management guided by principles of sustainability. So obviously, the reduction of non-compostable, non-degradable products contributes to less waste going to the landfill that needs to be either shipped off island or that unfortunately makes its way into the composter, which degrades the quality of the compost and causes other issues. So, and it's clearly environmentally responsible to start reducing the amounts of materials that are environmentally bad. We do have a list, Erica could put it up if need be, but our recycling coordinator has put together a list that of substitute materials that are compostable or acceptable environmentally, and that can be and will be provided to retailers. We're working very shortly now and have been for well over 2 years now on the plastics ban outreach. And we'll add this to our outreach, but if businesses aren't aware of the plastics ban at this point, they've been somewhere else, because we've been doing a lot of outreach about it, and we need to start doing some enforcement. So hopefully you will adopt these amendments and we'll get our outreach going, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Brooke?
The only question I have is the definition of biodegradable and which standard. I see that there's a note. There's 2 different standards, and one addresses PFAS more directly than the other. And I'm not sure which one we'd be approving in this draft.
Brooke, where are you looking?
Right here. It's under 222-2 definitions.
I'm happy to speak to that if you'd like.
Thank you, Graham. Recycling coordinator can speak to that.
So that's up to you. We wanted to present you with the options from an environmental leadership perspective, and certainly with what we are experiencing within the town and learning about from DEP. Any opportunity we can decrease PFAS in our environment, and especially in what containers, for instance, we're eating from, makes sense, especially when we can hit it at the source, right? So the recommendation would be to switch to the Biodegradable Products Institute certification, and also hopefully see that be extended to the single-use plastics ban as well. The ASTM standard is written in there right now because that is what's in line with the plastics ban. But since then, PFAS has become more of an issue and has been included in the BPI certification. Does that answer your question?
It begs another question. Or several questions. If our purpose is to align the two, does it make sense to go ASTM and then come back with a proposal to change them both to BPI? And then my second question is, Graham, through the chair, is there availability of these products at the BPI standard that so that our businesses aren't hampered? Excuse me.
There's the BPI website actually has a really wonderful catalog of all the products that they have certified across many different vendors. And it's a great place to find a lot of these options. So you're not digging around as much for the various other options that can be more confusing.
Clarification question on timing. If we were to pass this, when does it go into effect? When will it be enforced?
Well, you could put a date on it. It would typically be in effect once advertised. But you could put, I thought Roberto was gesturing to me, but I think it's just the light. You could certainly put a date on it. I mean, we are going to need a little bit of time to do some outreach on this.
Yeah, I think the businesses are going to need a lot of time, and also the vendors to the U.S. Foods and Cisco's to even get the products with the supply chain. So
I will note that there may still be some supply chain issues, but early on when we were discussing this with, and Graham, you can help me remember who it was. I think it was U.S. Foods. The message I think we were hearing was, if you don't put requirements like this into effect, there's not really much of a market for the materials that are compostable and are biodegradable, and people aren't going to order them. The few will, but not the bulk of them. So they were saying that if, this is a requirement, they will get stocked materials, but it could take a little time. So I don't know what Graham and Roberto might think. We neglected to talk about the enforcement date today, but what, September did you say? December 31st. So we might as well just give them 6 months. That
Okay.
sounds
All right.
reasonable.
Right, Matt?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points. I think the supply chain is real. The issues trying to source this stuff is real, number one. I've been, getting biodegradable, tableware, stuff like that. I question whether that is better in total, but I've been spending the extra money and doing it because it's the rule. I do think that but they're out occasionally, and they're out a lot more now. A lot of things that you think are, relatively easy, you just order. It's not like that right now. That it really is an issue. Number one. Number two, one of the things that I find, I like the idea of being leaders on this, and some things have come around, like bread bags, where there was nothing at all 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The mills have it now, and it is, not that much more expensive. So the world is moving that way. I'm not sure if it meets these standards, and I think most operators are having a hard enough time, staffing and staying open and paying their rent, that understanding where each thing came and whether it hits a certain standard will be very difficult. I think it's not, it won't be top of the list. The other thing in all this that I think we've done, we do some things and we think we're doing the right thing, and then we push people into Pfas. We push people into other things that are worse than the thing they've replaced. What I would like to see is, I would like to see us, sort of tying wherever we're going to the landfill and how we're going to operate the landfill in a few years. I think some of these steps are somewhat premature. I like it in theory, but I think the reality is what we're doing is, a drop in a bucket. I bet 95% of the plastic that comes out here, 98%, is not going to be impacted by this. If someone packages the stuff in Hyannis, throws it in a cooler and brings it over to one of our stores, it's legal. But if someone is hiring people and doing it here on island, it's not. And so it's sort of an interesting thing that we're doing, and I would hope that we would sort of think it through and tie it to the landfill and tie it to sort of fairness. I'm worried that it's not going to be, anyway, those are just my comments. I think in theory, it's a good thing to try to do, but I don't know that it's going to, I think we could spend a lot of time on something that we'd be better off spending that time figuring out how to gather all the organics in green buckets from everybody and getting them into the composter. I think we could spend our time more effectively potentially. And then, and if we end up going to some sort of gasification or some other thing in 5 years, we might be banning the actual feedstock of that unit, and we might be pushing people into, sort of biodegradable that isn't necessary, sort of biodegradable plastic or other things that are not as good for that unit. So I think we should understand kind of the big picture as we move this along.
I would respectfully disagree somewhat with what you're saying, Matt. We've had extensive internal discussions about this, and there are going to be many things that we will need to do to improve the compost and reduce waste going into the landfill, which all impacts how the landfill will be operated in the future. This is one step of probably several that we are recommending that we should implement moving forward. Graham can certainly speak to it a little bit more. She's been much more involved in it over the past couple of years, but this is basically what she has been working on for 2 or 3 or more years since she started with the town. And I think we have thought it through. And we've been meeting very regularly with our landfill consultant, and there are some unanswered questions with regard to the operation of the landfill 25 years from now, but when this is a recommended step to move us forward to waste reduction and environmental responsibility. I don't know if you want to add anything, Graham?
I would love to, thank you. The biodegradable packaging bylaw honestly is something that was fantastic and well thought through by the community back, years, decades ago, and has made a huge impact on the island. People are so excited in other communities about banning styrofoam, banning plastic bags and such, and working so hard in their communities to try to get that done. And Nantucket did that so long ago, in the takeout containers and all of that. So it has made a huge impact, this bylaw, on our community, our landfill, and the health of our environment, as well as our probably human health in many ways. When we're talking about the landfill in general, more broadly, and how does this affect it, PFAS, all of this, one big part of the plastic span outreach that we did was talking not about single-use alternatives, but looking also about multi-use, reusable alternatives, and trying to get people to think about that option first and foremost. That was a big part of the water refill station efforts that through, with Remain, in partnership with Remain, the land bank, and visitor services made huge efforts on that side of things. And reusable is always typically the best answer for so many reasons. So while we really want to do, update our regulations for the biodegradable packaging bylaw and help it be more enforceable and make more sense, the PFAS piece is also a big part of that I would hope that you all consider as well. Source reduction is the name of the game, right? It's very difficult to manage PFAS once it's already in the environment. So source reduction is, if we have an opportunity for it, let's do it.
Thank you, Graham. We're going to go to the public. Heather Woodbury has her hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Heather.
Sorry, I'm at my daughter's end of year soccer thing, trying to also stand up for my small business. So I guess my biggest thing, it kind of goes on what Matt Fee said. I mean, I think if you're looking at what 90% of what's going into the landfill, it's coming from places like Stop and Shop. It's coming from Nantucket Fish and Meat Market, who are allowed and given the pass that because it's packaged off island, it's completely acceptable to come on to the island, be sold. And you're asking small businesses, and I'm all for the environment, but you're asking the small businesses that are locally owned and have only one or two options for vendors, that we are now responsible for trying to make sure that the packaging is appropriate. And we have all the proper silverware, all the proper, cups for iced coffee, et cetera. But we sell our quarts of soup in reusable quart containers. And I have some that have been in my dishwasher multiple times. And I think that we're trending towards hurting small business and allowing places like Stop and Shop to do whatever they please. And the small business owners are the ones that are taking the brunt of it. Not to mention like supply issues. I can't get parchment paper, which is pan liner right now. There is a national shortage. We ordered some on Amazon.com, but I have not had it for over a week. And I can't get paper. And if I can't get paper, then I can't get paper boxes. I can't get pastry boxes. I can't get things to put my product in that is environmentally safe right now because of supply chain issues. So I think even if you say December, like who's to say? Like, I didn't think we'd have supply chain issues right now, but we do. And, I just think that, yes, there's alternative packaging, but a lot of times those aren't available. And I think if you start with the big dogs like Stop and Shop and places that are producing more plastic and the bad plastic and bringing it on Nantucket and force them to abide by our bylaws, then that will push other companies to be able to supply it. Because like I said, US Foods is the demand needs to be there. Well, if Stop and Shop has to start abiding by our rules, there's going to be a lot more places for us to order that stuff than if it's myself, who sells 50 quarts of soup a year. I just think that you need to really think of who this is going to penalize when you start removing words like reusable plastic.
Thank you, Heather. This is a public hearing. Anybody else, remote or in the room, like to speak? Board? Melissa?
Thank you. It's helpful to hear Heather's concerns, and I can't remember because of those sort of major retailers, and they are packaging some things off island. We cannot request that they comply with our local bylaws when things get here. I mean, that does seem rather concerning, and does put a huge onus on our small businesses. In practice, I think that all of our small businesses understand and have adapted really well as soon as they could reasonably comply. So I'm just wondering, given all of the continued challenges that businesses have, it's really lovely that as a disease, COVID is endemic, but I think from a economic standpoint, we're seeing such incredible challenges as an outfall from it. I don't think I could honestly vote to approve this with a compliance date of 6 months. We could revisit it in 6 months and see how things, how supply chain issues have lessened. But I think we have to have a really delicate balance here between economic impact and environmental impact at the same time. I also just want to add that I think it is, and I do believe that Graham and town administration have this focus, but it's not lost on me that these conversations and these regulations are happening as we're trying to build and design the future of how we process waste at the landfill. And that could change things. The regulations are going to be for what we have today. And so I think that they're changeable for what we build in the future. But this landscape is evolving. So I guess all of that is to say, I would be in support of this with a later implementation date.
April 1st?
I think
Just to
April
throw
1st
some-
would be fair. And then, if we are continuing to see some challenges, I would hope that the board could reconsider an extension of that timeline.
It will cost small businesses more money. When it happened at the Handlebar, I just raised the coffee up a nickel or a dime to cover it. Not everybody can do that.
No.
So you're passing the cost on to the consumer, and not everybody has to do it. So I feel if it was, enforced as well as it could be, where everybody's on the same playing field, that way all the muffins and all the coffee's got to go up 10 cents. It's a little more easy to swallow as a business owner, not still wonderful. So that's kind of when you're doing it, but someone else is kind of getting away with it, and it's hard to enforce. There's a lot of different things going out there. So I'm leaning towards a spring date to give time. Any other?
And Jason, if I could just
Sure.
add to that thought, and I think that we're saying the same thing. In addition to that, we've got labor shortages, businesses, being asked to supply housing, and housing costs being so high, inflation being high. I mean, there are so many financial challenges that face everyone, including our small business owners right now. They may be having to raise rates just to keep people employed and make sure they are earning a living wage. So all of that is in that context for me with a later start date. I really hear the messages from small business owners that, these costs and these transitions do feel unequitable. And if we could do something about that, we certainly would.
Man, I think you have a good point too, that if it's just this, then we're just doing a small little thing that seems maybe not pragmatic, but if it's a part, as Libby, you said, a part of there's another step and another step and another step, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, well, it's not just a cost thing. I know you know that, Jason. It's not just a cost issue. It's a it's a fairness issue. It's a how is it going to fit within the context of what we're going to do. I know that the town has done a lot of work, but I would like to know, where are we heading? Like, what's the how is this going to fit in with where we're heading? We're what, 4 years away now from a transition out there at the Waste Options. So this should make sure that it fits with that, and that I would love to see us, ask other industries to take part in this. This isn't just, a handful of industries. So anyway, and the shortages are real. You can't get Gould's mustard, which is incredible. Like, you can't get it in bulk. You haven't been able to get it for 3 months. And you'd think, Gould's, what are you talking about? There were, weather issues in Western Canada, which supplies 90% of the world's mustard seed, even to France, and there are wheat issues now because of the war in Ukraine. I mean, there's no sunflower oil. So now oil is being hoarded around the world. So it's an interesting and challenging time that the businesses are facing. I think we can do the right thing. I was on the biodegradable packaging committee way back when, and I think, a lot of this too is enforcement. Can we enforce? Are we enforcing? Gonna enforce? And if we're gonna do that, is that the top priority, or what? We have limited staff. What should the staff be doing? Like, if we're setting policy as a board, we should be thinking, what are the things we need? What are the things we need to spend time on, or we would like staff to spend time on? I think that discussion very rarely happens at our level. And I think with the shortages that we have and the issues that are happening, I think we need to, as a board, to have more of that, more of those types of discussions. And this is one of them. So,
Can I get clarification or just an education on why something's packaged, say in Hyannis, and sold here, and we can't regulate that plastic? What statute, or why can't we do that? If it's sold here, I figure that would be the.
I'm happy to speak to that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's because of how the bylaw and perhaps also the regs are written for the biodegradable packaging bylaw, and that's how it differs in part from the single-use plastics ban. So that could be changed. It might take town meeting vote, but that it was just how it was originally written, that anything packaged on island. So in that way, it was more focused on plastic bags and takeout containers, for instance, that it was focused on stuff packaged locally. Whereas the plastics ban is about what can be sold and distributed here on the island, regardless of where it comes from.
Thank you, Graham. Libby, can we look into that for a future town meeting bylaw from the select board? I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but the possibility of changing that bylaw?
Yeah, which bylaw?
So anything that's sold here, regardless of where it's made, I'm sure you have to get very detailed on that, but not to pick on meat and fish, but that was Heather's example. It's made in Hyannis and shipped over.
So I think the way Graham explained it is that the plastics bylaw has specific materials which are banned to be sold here. So Stop and Shop cannot sell what those materials are. In order to do that for the biodegradable packaging regulations, as I think Graham was saying, we would have to amend them further to mimic that language. Mm-hmm. So I think we'd want to look into that a little more, not do it right now on the fly. But I think we also need to take into consideration, and I very much hear what the small business concerns are. And they are very concerning, especially right now with supply chain and all the things that Matt said. Those are definitely real. There's many products that Stop and Shop would probably have to figure out somewhere else or here how to repackage using biodegradable materials. Nothing's impossible. But it would probably take some time to launch and figure out. And we have been having discussions with them about that. it would probably take some time. They do ship a lot of their packaging in which the things they sell come in. They ship that off island. They do not take that to the landfill. So that's a burden off. But Graham and Roberto, I'm sure we could look further into the feasibility of having the materials that are listed in here not be sold by anybody.
Is that a town meeting vote? It's a
To
bylaw.
be clear, though, to be clear, one of the genius parts in some ways about the biodegradable packaging bylaw is that it is not pointing out specific items, but it's kind of a blanket coverall, saying that everything has to be packaged in biodegradable material or reusable material. So if we think about that with Stop and Shop, and I would love for us to get there, but that means every single item in Stop and Shop and at like Bartlett's, everywhere else has to be in biodegradable material. That means ice cream containers, that means milk, that means, you know, every last thing in Stop and Shop.
Okay, thank you.
The other issue, I believe, is interstate commerce. There are certain rules that, you know, that influence this and whether we can force people to do it or not. That if my memory serves me correctly, when we dealt with this before, that was one of the issues.
Okay, could we go to Heather? Has her hand up?
Hi, thanks, guys. Jason, I was kind of asking the same thing about like, how is it that, you know, Stop and Shop and other businesses that are getting that free pass? And, you know, yes, I understand that milk and certain things might be almost impossible. But when I walk in as a bakery owner, when I walk into their bakery section and everything is in very cheap, not recyclable plastic, you know, not reusable plastic, you know, and they've got thousands of cupcakes and cakes and things like that they're packaging. And then I am possibly going to lose what I can sell my quarts of soup. And like I said, maybe 50 a year. It just seems like if we started with the small things, that there are already options out there for that, and forcing Stop and Shop to use those that we use, I think would, one, eliminate a ton of waste, and two, you know, would force other, like the larger companies who do produce things to make more biodegradable, environmental friendly packaging. You know, they still, when you go to the Olives bar, like they still have those crappy plastic containers that we aren't allowed to use. Like there's places that we can start, and I'm not sure why they got a pass. And that was my question, is why do they get a pass, you know, and how do we fix that? Because I think, again, 90% of the plastic that we are throwing away is coming from, you know, off island. And, you know, we do the best that we can, but I can't put quarts of soup in a paper container and expect it to be okay in a day, or a customer takes it home. Like, I don't have certain things we sell, you know, people shop with their eyes, and we are a small business. And so when you ask me to put something in a container that nobody can see into, it's going to sit there because people aren't going to know what it is. But then I go into Stop and Shop, and they, you know, and other businesses, and because it's made off island, they're allowed to use whatever packaging they want. And I just think that that's where I would like the consideration, is that, you know, myself and, you know, Expresso to Go and other places that are family owned, and here, and we're doing the best we can and bringing in, when I can, you know, the packaging and the cups and the silverware, you know, that Matt Fee was saying. But, you know, besides the supply chain demand, it's like, it's falling on me to up my prices. And then people are like, well, I can get a cake at Stop and Shop for $12. And it's like, yeah, because they don't have the things that we have to deal with. The quality is also not the same, but thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Matt, then Brooke.
Yeah, a lot of comments on food, but there's more than, you know, food. This is across the island. There's retail has tons of plastic, you know, sort of the construction industry brings tons and tons of plastic. We're wrapping boats. You know, you look at it, and it's, you know, if we're going to tackle this, we really, you know, we need a committee in time, and really to tackle it with everybody. You know, over time, we need to knock it away. What's the most, you know, in some of the, it's interesting, when we first did it, you say, okay, we'll get rid of plastic bags, then we'll go to paper, and that's great. We've all done that, except when you look at how much heavier paper is, and how much, how much it costs to bring the pay. And I'm not saying to go back to plastic, but when you actually do an analysis of how much oil is involved, how much petroleum in transportation from bringing the paper everywhere, it's worse than the plastic bags. So you have to look and say, how are we going to use that? How are we going to move to stuff and use it? Or how are we going to process it, that's already here? And I think sometimes we haven't got to the kind of cradle to grave. We haven't got to the second part of this. We're at the beginning steps in trying, but I think we have to figure out, how do we do it a little, figure out a little more fully.
Brooke?
Heather's comment about people shop with their eyes reminded me of a conversation I had with a cafe owner who said their number one selling product that sells in a clear container, they tried using paper container with the same ingredient label, and it went from their number one selling to the bottom. They tested it, and I just find that interesting. And to me, I'm very concerned about harming locally owned businesses relative to, a company like Stop and Shop. And I'm wondering whether, while I applaud everybody's work on this, and it's a really important piece of the puzzle, I would really be interested in knowing more about what our options are. I can imagine the packaged on island was a really easy, clear delineation of what we were talking about that made that original bylaw enforceable and clear, but it seems we need some more information, and maybe there's some categories that we could add that would impact the larger retailers as well. And I don't know whether that means we hold off on this or we just delay the implementation date with a request that we get more information about that.
How's everybody feel? Oh, go ahead, Graham.
So if we want to focus on certain items that should be, banned from off island, like bread bags and such like that, the clearest course of action would be to add that to the single-use plastics ban. Adding specific items that are banned coming from off island in this is just, I think, going to make this bylaw and regulation very confusing. And as much as I would love for just to put apply this to everything coming from off island and packaged on island, obviously that doesn't make too much sense in reality. If everything that you purchase on island, if everything from formula to everything else, is it isn't biodegradable or reusable packaging. So if there are items like bread bags and such that people feel would even the playing field in some ways from an equity standpoint, as well as environmental concerns they have that are used for off-island packaged items, it would make sense to add those items to the plastics ban bylaw. And with this one, just to be clear, a lot of businesses are already in full compliance with this just by the nature of what they sell. So really in this, we were hearing a lot of businesses and people in the community concerned about all the loopholes they were seeing. So we were in part looking to close some of those loopholes, and then also focusing on the PFAS element of this, which it's very clear. If we can, mitigate and eliminate PFAS at the source, that's the way to do it. There's no question about that, and we see that as a trend globally.
Thank you, Graham. Where's the board? I think, Brooke, you kind of put two options out there: to not do anything and relook at it, or to put it at a later date in the spring and work on it from now until then. It was similar.
Yeah, I'm really of two minds here. That sort of the drop in the bucket argument is really resonating with me, that how much impact does this have relative to the other sources of PFAS and this kind of waste relative to the impact on, this really does affect local businesses who are packaging their products on Nantucket in a very discreet way. That concerns me. On the other hand, you start somewhere and I don't know.
Dawn?
I'm kind of feeling like pushing something that far out, maybe we should just revisit this at a later date and give it some more consideration and get some more input. I mean, we've had one business owner, I mean, besides Matt giving some input from that perspective, talk tonight. And this is pretty impactful on a lot more people than that.
And I also think, given the supply chain issues, like by delaying implementation of this a little bit, we get some time to see what happens in that arena as well, rather than everybody scrambling to get ready to comply. And then we say, oh yeah, you're still having problems. We're going to kick it. We'll give you a little more time. Might be fits and starts a little bit on it. And I would, I'd be interested in what can we bring to town meeting that's more comprehensive on this front, including this, and not doing this, but making it part of something more comprehensive.
Wilson?
Thanks, Jason. I agree with my fellow board members' comments. My only, additional suggestion is that we make sure there's plenty of runway. In my mind, voting something essentially in July and giving people through April is a really nice runway to be able to implement a change that could be significant on their business. So, we could postpone this for say 5 months, but I would still recommend that whatever we do, there's a nice runway for implementation so that businesses can adapt. And I also agree, I think it's worth digging into what prospective warrant article we could bring forward to amend the bylaw, if that's worthwhile or not. And I think to Matt's point, it may be a moot point. I don't know, but I think we need some time to digest it and think about it.
In my mind, it's what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What will the impact be? What are the costs going to be to people? But what is the positive impact going to be? And quantify those things in a way that we and the public can understand. And it's one thing to say this is our sustainable goal, and you guys want to be sustainable, and I think we all do. I know we all do. But the question is, is this, prove it. How is this going to work, and why are we going to do it? And then we'll all get behind it. The public will get behind it, and we might find when we do some of that work that something else is the low-hanging fruit to do first. It might be bread bags. Who knows? But there might, because there's now new stock that people can use for those off-islanders and on. Not to pick on bread bags. They've been exempted for years, but I just think there is a way, I think, to roll, to sort of figure this out a little more, I can't, I'm having trouble with the word, but comprehensively, I think is the word, or one of.
So if we're going to not pass this and ask staff to look into it more, I think we need to be very clear on what we want them to look at and do. I think we're not quite there yet. So I feel like if we're not really clear on what we would like Graham and Roberto and whoever else to look into, then I would say we pass it for an April 1st date, and at the same time, dig into it. I guess there's 2 or 3 different ways we could go. I guess we could not pass it and just say, nope, we're not going to do anything. But right now, I don't think very super clear on what we want to be brought back to us.
That's a tough question. It's sort of, I know you don't mean it that way, but it's a bit of this is what it's passive aggressive. It's what my employees say when they don't want to do something. Well, tell me exactly what you want. How do you want me to sweep? Tell me exactly when you want me to sweep. You get, at some point, it's, what is, so I know you don't mean it that way, but I just have enough scar tissue from that kind of thing. I think that there's got to be, I would like to see, I would like to see the back work on why we're doing this and how this will help and how, and sort of see how we got to where we got, other than just, sort of the change here, and what is the best way to do this to go forward in context with what we're going to be doing at the landfill. Those are if you're asking what do we want, and I can't tell you what that is because it's still in progress. But I think it's something that we all agree needs to be dealt with.
Well, hold on, it's just something, I got to respond. It's just something I see here a lot when we want more, but we don't give direction, and then it's not going to come back because Libby and I will talk next agenda meeting. So what do you guys really want? I'm like, I don't know, I'll have to look at the tape, but didn't really give you any direction. That's what it's not passive aggressive at all. We just need to give them clear direction, even if it's general. And I think we've kind of done it, but I think I'm asking for more. Sorry, Brooke.
I'm happy to clarify what I'm curious about and what I want to know. I want to understand what do we have an understanding of what the amount of packaging is subject to this bylaw versus not subject to this bylaw in terms of, I think mostly I'm talking about in the prepared foods arena, baked goods, prepared foods. And I'm talking about on a year-round basis, right? So we obviously have seasonal businesses that are open, that are contributing a lot for 3 months out of the year. And then we have most of us buying at the Stop and Shop in cheap clamshell plastic containers. So what's the balance? And then is there a route to balancing the impact of a change in this bylaw across all businesses in this area? Can we do it with interstate commerce? How would we do it? And under which bylaw makes sense to do it to make it more equitable? Those would be the two questions that I would want to move forward with if we delay implementation.
Erica?
I just want to get clarification on what Brooke said. Are you referring to the single-use plastics bylaw or these biodegradable regulations?
Well, I think it all in other words, Graham had said it may be better to if the goal is to address the packaging at all retailers, but it's better to do that through the single use.
Okay. Just want to make sure
Rather
from my
than the
notes.
biodegradable. I think seeing how those two integrate and what bylaw changes overall.
I think those are great suggestions, and I would recommend that we ask to revisit this perhaps in October, and that would give us plenty of time to, check in. If staff can get that information by then, great. It gives us some time to debate it, public time to give us input, and then we can talk about what a feasible implementation date could look like.
And then at that point, if we want to do April 15th at some level.
That's still 6 months.
And then the single-use plastic ban, we'd have time there as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think it would give us some time to really take advantage of the new public information officer who'll be working with the health department and natural resources, who can really help businesses, get that message out more concisely. And not that that's not been a good job, but I think there'll be some extra asset there to help communicate whatever those new rules are very succinctly. So that would be my suggestion, is to bring this back to this board in October.
How's everybody feel? Dawn?
Everything that's been said makes sense to me.
Okay.
And if warrant articles are necessary, that gives us time.
Okay, so we're looking for more teeth to expand it and not just have this one.
Understand the context better,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. Matt, you good with that? Or do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so do we want to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes.
Do you need a motion to postpone?
I think we would re-advertise this if you brought it forward in the future, so maybe a motion to take no action at this time.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to take no
Is that-
action at this time.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is that unanimous? Don and Matt? I didn't hear. Yeah?
Aye.
Yeah, that's aye. All right, thank you. Town managers report.
Okay, so we've tried to revise the actual report that's in your packet a little bit to make it clearer and to focus more on fewer items, but items that we are spending a lot of time on and that I want to explain to you in a little bit more detail than I have been. I've been trying to give you more of an overview, and this is meant to be more of a deeper dive into some of the things that we are working on and that's coming to our attention and things like that. So first off, we had a cabinet retreat. It was a problem-focused retreat, mostly on staffing and housing, on May 17th. I won't go through it all, but there are a lot of items listed there that came up and that were discussed at the retreat. We are pretty much working on all of them, and they are intended to, again, address recruitment, retention, and housing for our employees so that we can have a solid workforce for the town, and, you know, one that is stable and that we can rely on with people in positions that, you know, we don't have to fill every couple of months. So just, you can read through that, but there's a lot of things at work here. 2022 annual town meeting and annual town election follow-up is underway. Active items include the bylaws, which have been sent to the Attorney General's office by the town clerk. Home rule petitions, I think, actually were sent today up to our legislators, and they will get going. And the short-term rental work group is in progress. And those are just some highlights. There's a lot of other things that are being followed up on from town meeting, but those are the main ones. And we'll talk about short-term rentals after this. Climate Action Plan Sustainability Framework. We have had extensive internal discussions as to structure, staffing, and scope of developing this sustainability framework within the town and to operationalize sustainability activities, resiliency activities, all of that kind of thing. And we kind of go back and forth between, should it be a standalone department? Should it be divided among departments? How do we operationalize these things? So we're trying to come to grips with how we're going to do it. And when we've settled on something, we'll review it with you. We do have some funding in our fiscal 23 budget that hopefully will go to a staff person that can be responsible for some of these things and get it out throughout the town. Facilities master plan and facilities issues. We are actively discussing with our consultant, which is Weston and Sampson, the DPW facility. And as you will recall, last summer, we brought to you a presentation as to what it might take to keep the DPW facility where it is, what it would take to move it, and a couple of locations that have been identified for a potential move. The one we've landed on for exploration purposes right now is in the Delta Field area, the Sun Island Road area. It's airport property under airport jurisdiction. We will have a status report for you all, hopefully sometime this summer. We're looking at what it would take to permit the site. It does have endangered species on it, and it most likely would require some kind of mitigation that could involve the acquisition of other property elsewhere. Since we did not pass the central municipal facility item, which was a funding request for design of a central municipal facility out here at 2 Fairgrounds Road, we are most definitely going to need to increase staffing and financial resources in fiscal 24 for facilities. We in no way are equipped to continue maintaining all of the buildings that are not in a central location. We are going to be working on updating our facilities maintenance plan, which was last updated in 2015. We definitely need additional staffing. We are probably going to be looking at what a facilities department with the types of buildings that we are maintaining needs in terms of staffing. And we're looking at interim office space issues. We do have a number of positions that were approved at for fiscal 23, and we need to figure out where to put these people. We have been talking about remote work, commuting, and all of that ties into this, but it's not, it takes time and it takes planning. So we're looking at all of it. Let's see here, interim office space. There is a procurement underway for some maintenance work at the town building, and that is going to include, and I might not even have all of it listed here, but window and sill replacements, painting of the trim and the cupola, repairing the gutters, and other exterior work at not just the town building, but 20 South Water and East Chestnut. And again, the procurement is underway. Funding is available for that. We expect it to be pretty costly. Baxter Road long-term planning, as some of you know, and people in the room like Ken, we've been spending a lot of time with our consultants on Baxter Road long-term planning. We have an update to the board with our consultant, Arcadis, scheduled for your next meeting, July 6th. Solid waste long-term planning, as I mentioned earlier, we have a regular internal solid waste long-term planning meeting. We are meeting with Waste Options at the end of June to check in with them. And a couple of the things we are continuing to work on based on the board's last workshop on solid waste long-term planning is the direction we got was let's continue down the road of the town owning the composter and the transfer station. So we're working on those things and what that takes, as well as the other solid waste management issues, including there's a food waste ban coming our way from DEP requirements. We need to start discussing how that is going to be implemented. The plastics ban, waste reduction programs, and waste processing, all of those things are under discussion at our internal meetings. And we most recently talked about updating the board on those things at our next workshop, which probably will be either later this summer or very early fall.
What's the time frame on the new DEP regulations that are?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say sometime towards the end of the year.
Wow.
But and I believe it's for commercial. But I will find that out.
I mean, I think it's already in place if you're over a certain size.
If you're over a certain
If
size,
you're over
yeah.
a certain size, it's already in place in the state. And this is one of the things where I think if we could set up a system to capture all that and run it through the digester without a lot of the other junk that gets in there, we would end up with a really good product. So this is like one of those things I think is a great thing to spend time and effort on, have green bins and have everybody on island collect it, and have the green bins dumped in the right place. That to me is a win, so, or just putting them in windrows. So, I think if we're going to put time in, I think that's a easy win, that to me. So, and it's a step toward where we have to go.
That is definitely one of the things that we've been talking about, and how do we get people to do it, and who's going to collect the green bins and all that kind of thing.
Though I have to say, in America, that's a lot more common. People understand compostable when it's food waste.
Mm-hmm.
I know my friends who come visit from elsewhere are very confused by what we mean by that, but they do food waste where they live.
Mm-hmm.
So.
PFAS townwide risk assessment. This isn't something that I've been directly involved in, more peripherally, but it is definitely ongoing and active. And we are spending a lot of staff time on PFAS. Stormwater and drainage issues. I wanted to bring this up. There's a number of initiatives that are underway here, and I might not get them all in order, but in no particular order, we've established an internal work group that is looking at how to either centralize or consolidate our townwide resources for stormwater management, and that might include permitting, project coordination, outreach, all of those types of things. Who does what in each department with respect to stormwater, and that ranges from, again, permit requirements to monitoring to enforcement to a more robust catch basin cleaning program. We have many, many catch basins. We certainly do not have the equipment or the staff to get around to all of them. There are also a number of private catch basins, and I know that a number of private neighborhoods have trouble getting their catch basins cleaned, and that leads to problems on not only their roads, but overflow onto town roads. We are getting a lot of complaining about stormwater, not exactly recently, over the last couple of years, but it's exacerbated recently with a couple of heavy downpours that we've had, which are clearly going to increase with climate change. And that is due to a variety of factors. Catch basins are an issue, but so is development, and the areas where some of this water used to drain into are gone. And impervious surfacing has increased dramatically all around the island. So we are working on what it's going to take to develop stormwater regulations. You have a public hearing scheduled for July 13th, I think. Is it 13th? For surface water and pool types of drainage that will address those things. That we are looking at that kind of as a phase 1, with a phase 2 being a more robust stormwater, either bylaw or regulation. That is probably going to require some staffing, but it is something that obviously we are getting more and more, it's more and more needed. There are 4 or 5 areas that are really getting active about what are you going to be doing? What is the town going to be doing about this giant puddle that's here every time it rains? And a lot of it is drainage off private roads. Some of these private roads are dirt. The dirt goes right into the town catch basins. And there's, as you might imagine, there's some finger pointing about that's not our problem, that's your problem, or you didn't do this or that. And so it is a complex matter, but we're trying to sort it out, but it will most likely have to be some kind of a phased situation.
Libby, can I ask you about catch basins? I talked to a caretaker who oversees one of the big neighborhoods in a larger organization downtown, and they both said who they usually third party out their catch basin cleaning. One went out of business, another one was bought by somebody else, and they can't find anyone. So I didn't know if are we seeing the same problems? Do we try to do it ourselves? Do we third party it out?
Well, we have 2 catch basin cleaners, one at the sewer department and one at the DPW. We have limited staff to use it, but they are out there. But we can't possibly get to all of them on a very regular basis. They're pretty much as needed. Now, we also had a discussion about this. We were thinking about developing a procurement to see if we could get a catch basin cleaner to come from off island at some times throughout the year. And maybe that could be organized through some outreach to the Civic League and the neighborhood associations. Hey, the catch basin cleaner is going to be here.
It could be a public-private kind of collaboration, just kind of like we should do that with, elevator maintenance,
Yes, just sort of coordinate when they're all going to be here. So we don't know how that's going to work out, but there's another issue, which is where do you dump the catch basin cleanings? And so right now the towns is, I think David said it's taken to sewer, but that's not for private use. He is working on and there are DEP regulations about this, so we have to be careful. He is working on a facility at the sewer treatment plant for this. So we're well aware that it's an issue. So we're trying to get at it.
Just on that topic, I think the biggest thing you talked about is, in my mind, it's development. We've grown to a certain size in these areas that can no longer, it used to work, it was fine. There were swales and there were yards that took the water and everything else. Now there isn't. And so things that were okay 10 years ago, 20 years ago are not okay anymore. And I think that's what we're facing. And certain areas, I'd say from downtown up to the airport, is an urban environment. And in an urban, it's going to be. Over time, this is all going to change. It's got to have sidewalks. It's all got to have catch basins and drainage and everything else. It's not going to be able to operate, the way it has operated for 300, 400 years. It's a different environment. And the more that we urbanize and densify the countryside, we're going to have the same issue. So that's what I sent everybody a study that talked about the cost of development. And these are the issues as you go that you have to look ahead and know how you're going to pay for it. Otherwise it just shows up, and it doesn't show up a little bit every year. It shows up in one big chunk. All of a sudden you have to do it. You've hit that tipping point and you have to do it. And so when we make some of these choices, we should be running it through that filter,
Thank you, Matt, for that. That is definitely on our radar. DEP regulatory changes. I will have more information about this after July 12th, which is when staff is meeting with DEP. There are most likely some very substantial regulations coming our way that involve Title V and watershed permitting. And I think this is pretty public. We received a letter a couple of weeks ago from DEP. It is to all Cape and Islands communities specifically, and the letter requests that each community schedule a meeting with DEP, so we have done that. They are proposing 2 regulatory changes, and this all relates to water quality in estuaries and other water resources. The 2 regulatory changes are, I'll just read you a little excerpt from their letter. A primary source of nitrogen contamination is septic systems, and our regulatory authority for such systems is the Title V regulation. Mass DEP must ensure these requirements are protective of water quality. Therefore, we are proposing to revise Title V regulations to establish nitrogen-sensitive areas for watersheds draining into estuaries subject to an EPA-approved total maximum daily load for nitrogen, or where it has been scientifically demonstrated that the estuary is impaired by nitrogen. Now, we already have some of this in place. We are probably ahead of most of the Cape communities, but I don't think we're going to be totally exempt from this. This is going to impact us. The revised regulations would require, unless towns take advantage of a watershed alternative approach, such as sewering, it doesn't say that, but that would be a watershed alternative approach, that within 5 years of the effective date of the NSA, nitrogen sensitive area designation, new on-site systems include an existing on-site systems upgrade to enhanced nitrogen treatment systems demonstrating the lowest nitrogen levels in their effluent. Now, many years ago, Roberto's predecessor put into place, and the board of the selectmen at the time, acting as a board of health, put into place regulations that were stricter than the state regulations. So I think that has helped us be a little bit ahead of the game here. But this could be very impactful on septic owners. A second regulatory provision is to formally establish the watershed permit. These permits are 20-year permits that are based on long-term wastewater plans that will achieve water quality goals and provide communities the opportunity to utilize a range of approaches, including centralized sewer treatment and innovative approaches. So again, we have done some of this already. We already have a comprehensive wastewater management plan. Some towns don't, or they're not as far along with their implementation as we are. So again, more to come after this meeting that we have with DEP, but just to read another little thing out of their letter. These proposed regulatory changes may impact your communities and citizens. And I don't say may, I say will. So that's something that is just come up that we are going to have to spend a lot of time on. Next item, Matica beach erosion. I think I've been trying to keep you all in the loop about that. We have been able to establish some additional parking out on Macy Road. You have a public hearing coming up to make that road one way. I've been out there a couple of times. It's at least providing parking for people who are going out to Nantucket. There definitely are business uses of it. And we've gotten a lot of concern about the beach being quote closed. And not having lifeguards there. It's a pretty difficult situation because there's very, very limited parking there. If you go out there, you can see that. And the bluff is unstable. And the beach, excuse me, the bluff itself has a drop. And we've heard a variety of suggestions like, why don't you just dump some sand out there? Well, first of all, there's a permitting requirement for that. But secondly, that doesn't increase the parking. So we'd be inviting it's just not manageable. The problem is primarily the parking. And there's just no availability for people to park out there. There is a plan that lifeguards could be called to a scene if somebody's swimming and they get into trouble. We're exploring the possibility of whether or not we could get an agreement with the Madika Land Trust, and I have not, I hope if they're watching, I'm sorry, I have not been in touch with you yet, but I am planning to. We were going to ask about the possibility of putting a lifeguard stand down there. We've asked about that in the past, and there's been some liability concerns and access concerns, and is there going to be a whole lot more people going down there now? That beach is also, that parking area is also not gigantic, and we had some trouble last year with that. So we're doing the best we can with trying to deal with it. And this is what we're, as our coastal resiliency coordinator says, water is coming. And here it is in this area. And here's an impact of sea level rise and climate change and erosion. It's causing a real issue here. Parks Master Plan implementation. So again, Weston and Sampson is our consultant on this, and we have a variety of things underway with them. And our park and recreation director has been really great at working with them on this. We are working on fiscal 24 capital proposals for projects that are contained in the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And some of those include things like some potential additional fields out at Delta and possibly out at Nobadir and possibly Delta, but that is going to all be, that's going to need to be coordinated with this DPW facility potential. Tom Nevers debris, that's an active issue. So as you might recall, there is debris out there by the Tom Nevers Park that is coming out through the bluff as it erodes again. And it isn't so simple as let's just go yank it out of there. It's deep. There's been some ground penetrating radar that demonstrates it's way back in there. So if you pull it out, what happens? So we're trying to get that figured out. So Weston and Sampson is working on a plan to just how that might work. And one way that might work, quite possibly the way it will work is, and of course we need funding for this, but a project and permits, a project that would remove the debris, but then build the beach back up through some sort of constructed berm-like feature out there. That's probably going to be pretty costly, but that might be the only way to deal with something like this.
What is the debris? Is it an old building or what's
It's I don't know that anybody is quite 100% certain, but it seems like it's C&D like material. A lot of concrete, cables.
There's metal too.
Metal.
Yep, you can smell the metal.
Yeah.
Looks like it might have been a kind of a.
What's that?
Stuff that may be buried.
Navy stuff. That's
Yeah.
And how many bombs?
Hopefully there's no bombs, because they have done a very significant.
They have, I know.
But there's always the one that
They missed.
Right.
Well, this is, so other comment, this is
Yep.
good practice for when we when the landfill starts to be undermined in our kids' lifetime. When our kids, we're practicing now for them
Yes,
in
yes.
50 years.
Yeah, exactly. Our concession review study is kicked off, and that is got a kind of a team approach to it. We're going to be looking at fiscal 24 capital requests, and on the concession review study, so there's Surfside, jetties, and children's. Jetties is obviously in a flood area, but there may be ways to make the concession building resilient. So that's the focus there. Jetties also has the tennis courts, and we've been having a lot of discussion about the tennis courts. The tennis courts really need work, serious work. And are we really going to put serious work into something that is going to be underwater in a matter of years? It's also, it seems like a great location, but it's, and in some ways it really is, but it's also problematic with the shells and the seagulls and the
It's always windy
wind.
down there.
And it's nice to be near the beach and all, but we're thinking of where else those could be relocated to. So jetties, I think the thinking primarily is keep some kind of building, develop the historic features of it, but make it resilient. Children's has been a bit problematic. And an idea that came up a number of years ago was replace the building with food trucks so you don't have to maintain a building anymore and have mobile restrooms and the food trucks. That went over like a lead balloon with some of the nearby residents. But things are a bit different now because now we have a coastal resiliency plan and now we are seeing actively the effects of, again, sea level rise and climate change. So we're probably going to be revisiting that. Surfside, kind of similar. The building is not, just doesn't seem to be able to keep up with the use, and neither do the bathrooms. They're just not sufficient for the crowds that go to Surfside. So we're talking a little bit along the same lines. Let's evaluate what it would take to have maybe more of a food truck-like concession out there with mobile restrooms that are better than what's there now and more of them. They can be moved seasonally, potentially. So those are some of the things we're looking at with the concession review study. We are also working to collaborate more with the school on fields and use of fields and how many fields do we need and that sort of thing. Okay, the area of personnel. We are working on hiring some key positions that were approved at the 2022 annual town meeting. There are a number of them. They all need job descriptions. They almost all need collective bargaining negotiations and compensation assignments and things like that. Our classification and compensation study is well underway. We had a meeting today with the consultants about it. They are expecting to give us a draft classification. I forget what they're calling it. It's a chart, and we're to be reviewing it over the next couple of weeks and getting it back to them. We are continuing to work on our succession planning and retention long-term strategies, collective bargaining negotiations, hallelujah, those are done. Performance reviews are ongoing. The fire chief search is underway. We have a search underway right now for the assistant finance director position. Town accountant search is underway. We have about 30-ish vacancies currently townwide, excluding school, airport, and water. And we are having a real problem with project management. We just do not have staff resources to manage multiple large projects all at the same time. So we're looking at how we can engage consulting, professional consulting services to help with that. Housing, there are a number of initiatives going on with housing. We're working to finalize our town employee housing, or finalize might be a little bit premature. We're working through a town employee housing assistance program. As you all will all recall, the town meeting approved $1 million for this program, and we're trying to sort out what the program could look like. And there are a lot of, we were calling them rabbit holes. There are many, and you go down one and then there's another one. And so we're trying to work that through. In conjunction with the housing director, we are scheduling a state of housing workshop. I think you all got the invite on that for July 19th. And the idea there is that we review all of the initiatives, and Tucker and I have talked about putting up a big map that shows where all the housing projects are, who they're for, what their timeline kind of is, and what their status is, so that people are more informed about what is happening. And we're working on planning for how the town can manage and maintain its own housing stock, as we are potentially acquiring additional properties for town employee housing. We need to maintain those properties, and not just maintain them, but manage. We're a landlord. So we quite clearly cannot manage being a landlord right now, even with the housing stock we have currently. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that. And can we put out a bid for property management? Do we need to hire more staff? How to get at it? But it's something that we really need to focus on because it's coming our way.
On that issue real quickly?
Sure. Yep.
I think housing is number one. Everything that you talked about prior required staff, required this, required that, but we don't have anywhere for them to live.
Yep.
So I almost think that this is in my mind, the number one absolute top priority if we are going to be able to continue to operate a town. You know, if we're going to be able to mow lawns and empty sewers and do all the grunt work that needs to happen to run a town, you need to have really good housing that people are proud and want to be in, houses that any of us would want to live in. And if we don't have that, then all this other stuff is kind of wishful thinking. All this other stuff, eventually you're not going to be able to hire, at any price, you're not going to be able to hire consultants to do this. You're not going to be able to outsource it because everyone's going to be too busy.
Yep.
And, because they don't have housing either. So I just think this is something, it was predicted in the 90s. We knew it was coming, and, COVID sped it up, and it's here with a vengeance. So, I think that's number one when we do our strategic planning. I think it's got to be number one, and maybe some of these other things have to be put to number 2 or 3 because we won't be able to do them. So anyway, that's my
Yep. Thank you for that,
stating the
Matt.
obvious.
Yeah,
but
no, we're giving quite a bit of attention to it at staff level. Upcoming projects, we'll probably give you an update on the third sewer force main a little bit later in the summer. I think that's still scheduled, Erica, for fall, as far as you know, to start late fallish.
September 12th.
September 12th, okay. Thank you. Sidebar, it must be complaint season, because we're getting quite a bit of them, and quite frankly, to be blunt about it, people are cranky, and they are frustrated, and they are impatient, and they in some cases are quite rude. But that's our situation that we have to deal with, and we're trying to do the best we can. But again, with what Matt was getting at, like everybody else, we don't have the staff to get at everything immediately. So yes, there are delays with getting seemingly simple requests addressed, done. And that the third sewer force main made me think of that, because we were a bit delayed in the South Shore Road sewer and water project, and there were detours, and the road was bad, and the residents were not very happy with it, but it is work that has to be done. And there was definitely a supply chain issue there, getting the pipes here and all of that. And there is a base coat going down, if it didn't already go down. I can't quite exactly remember when that's happening.
Tomorrow and Friday.
Tomorrow, thank God. Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on what you're saying right now, though, regarding the sewer project on South Shore Road, the 2, because there's a gravity and the sewer force main. I think we had hoped that they'd all be wrapped up by the end of this season. They're going to need to go back in September to finish that up.
Yep.
Just FYI.
Yes, so it's unfortunate, but again, it is a reality because of supply chain and labor issues, and all those things are real, and they cause real delays. And these infrastructure projects have got to be done. Road and sidewalk work, these are just some of the things that have most recently been taking attention. North Liberty paving, that I forget when that's happening. Soon?
So we have been trying to talk to our paving contractor about getting in there. He tells us soon. I know that we have a couple of other projects that the same paving contractor is slated for.
Yep.
So maybe in the middle of those two in July. I mean, paving in July is not going to be fun, but I know we need to get that done.
Yes, so that is happening soon. Against all odds, we were able to widen the intersection at Washington and Francis. That's kind of considered phase 1. Ultimately, there may be more that happens there once we've examined the potential elevation of Washington Street. Waite Drive should be complete before the end of the month.
Actually, that's got a little bit of a delay, again, because of the paving.
Okay.
So we're looking at final paving of that the week of July 18th.
Oh dear, okay.
It's probably not
It is
the
what it
last
is.
time she's going to say, well, it's going to be a couple more weeks.
Yes, because we've already heard that a couple times, but it is what it is. So thank you for that. Surfside Road in front of the high school has a base coat for the summer. We've done a number of downtown sidewalk improvements, more scheduled for the fall. Upper Main Street sidewalk is scheduled for a review. We have some funds approved at the for fiscal 23. We just need to now obviously find the resources to manage something like that. I need to get at this, but there is a state program. It's called WRAP, W-R-A-P, Winter something, something, something. It has to do with potholes. All municipalities in the state have been given some additional money to deal with potholes because the winter was so difficult. And there's a whole very specific process for it. So we're trying to get at that. And also, I should mention, it's not on here, but I'm going to add it right now. Skyline Drive is scheduled to be paved, get started paving tomorrow?
No, they're gonna, Monday or Tuesday they'll start, and they think it's
okay.
gonna be 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing to road and sidewalks?
Yeah.
Milestone Road bike path extension. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that at all.
No, because it's not starting yet, is it?
No, but we're gonna apply to the state for state approval.
We'll come to you later on that. As you know, there was a bike path installed from Monomoy to the Rotary. And the idea is to extend that from Monomoy to Pulpus. So it's in the planning stages, but hopefully that will be happening at some point in the fairly near future. Couple other things I just wanted to mention. Over the weekend, the USS, some of the USS Nantucket crew was here. I was able to meet the commander, Carrie Yakupison. Jason, you met her too. I'm bad at her last name. It's not easy.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Yeah, see, it's hard. But anyway, we met her, and it was really great to meet her. Sounds like the commissioning possibly will be occurring the fall of 2023, and that most likely will be in Boston. And I just wanted to add something that Greg worked on for me a little bit, which is Government Study Committee. We've talked about this, you all most recently, and we've heard some public input on this, have talked about organizing a government study committee to look at the type of government and open town meeting versus representative town meeting. So Greg looked up for me some other mission statements from various other towns about what they had been doing about this. So I'm trying to get a kind of a draft mission statement with some proposed membership put together for you for an upcoming meeting. And that is the report. And remember, that's not everything. Those are the main things.
Thank you, Libby. Okay, we'll go to select board comments or committee reports. Anybody have anything? Brooke?
Affordable Housing Trust met, and I just wanted to update the community on some timelines. The Housing Nantucket project at 31 Fairgrounds has, guess what, experienced supply chain and construction delays. And so they're expecting delivery of, there are 2 buildings up now, and the remainder of the modules that were sort of going to be coming in more recently. There was a shakeup at the contracting firm, and those are going to be delayed till fall. But I had a conversation with a contractor today, and he said it's really not going to be that much of a delay because now we've got expedited delivery on the rest of them. So the timeline. So occupancy in late fall, end of the year-ish. And then also the acceleration program that we've done at Wildflower with the Richmond companies is moving along. The final buildings are should have a CO shortly, and occupants are already moving in to both market rate and deed restricted units out there. So that's exciting. And they did have a 15-to-1 ratio of applicants to deed restricted units available. So clearly there's a vast shortage. And Habitat for Humanity's project also experienced, guess what, construction delays. They're expecting their modules to be set and occupancy by Christmas.
Thank you, Brooke. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. I'm happy that Roberto stayed for this whole meeting because I want to make sure I get it right. But at the Board of Health, we had an update on the fertilizer regulations. And yeah, he totally didn't know I was going to do that. And just jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't mind, Roberto. But the work group met, and we all received, I think, notification from John Giorgio that the timeline for us to make amended changes to the current regulation is closed, and we put an article forward to extend that window, but that article was voted down at town meeting, and so the fertilizer regulation cannot be amended. So the work group pivoted and said, okay, we'll focus on outreach and education since we can't propose a change. My suggestion to us is to perhaps even encourage them to continue to look at what changes we might like to make, and for this body to put forward at next town meeting that same article to expand the window if we can again, and perhaps even in tandem with that article put forth some changes. It may just be that the work group needs to know some direction from us that we would be encouraged and would put those articles forward if they could continue that study and that work. Does that sound good? Okay. And town council can tell us if that's totally not appropriate. So that's my update from the Board of Health.
Here's a question. Is the work group considering doing it through UMass, which is sort of we would have done if we could have? And if we do, that would go to the state and be more like, in my opinion, more likely to be embraced.
Actually, it's good that you're bringing it up now because, okay.
You might just have to hold it.
Okay. So it's good that you're bringing it up now because this is going to be awkward. There you go. Because town council's on the call. I was going to check out an email to see if we can alter the BMP and let that still be legal. Because we do have the two documents, which is the fertilizer regulation and the best management practices, both of which were adopted by the Article 68 work group. It's going to take me a while to remember those numbers. So if we can alter the BMP, we might still be able to get the work done that we were looking to do, which was mostly the record keeping. So the state already requires record keeping under 330 CMR. Don't remember the last number. I want to say it's 11, but I think I'm wrong. So what we're looking to do is just adopt for pesticides, and what we're looking to do is adopt that same record keeping style for fertilizer. If we can put that into the BMP, the same enforcement techniques work without having to go to UMass extension. If barring that, of course, we would have to go to UMass and do the whole process there.
Right. And my point is, if we have to go to the state, I think we should be going in tandem with UMass so that we've already, because they'll just probably likely say, go to UMass.
Yes.
So why not just do it prior? Yeah.
The
Bring
only-
something together that they already would say you have to do to have it approved.
The only reason we're the work group now, as what they call themselves, the only reason they want to alter the BMP first is because our BMP is more strict than the UMass extension, and it is already in effect based on the 2012 vote.
I have nothing more to add. It may be something that we want to consider as an agenda item in the near future if there is an article that we want to put forward for town meeting. I think it would be very successful if it was a select board article, not a citizen article. And I think it would be also really helpful, I mean, certainly through me and the Board of Health, but for us to continue to get some updates on the fertilizer work group and how the outreach and education is going, and just keep our finger on the pulse of this through the summer. That's it for me.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone else? Matt, Dawn? Just a couple of comments. You were flying through your report, Libby, but the Francis Washington Street extension, I walk through there or bike there almost on a daily basis. And so I watch how, this traffic, the cars and vans and everything see those who are crossing it. And it seems to be going really well. There's a lot of the view there because the cottages and things were taken down. I think people can see people more. So if you're on Washington Street heading towards the creeks trying to cross, it's working out pretty well as is. I'll keep kind of watching it to see if we need any adjustments. And then we were talking to the commander, Libby, at the commissioning. It was interesting that they're not just naming it Nantucket, but they're also doing some looking at the history, trying to pull different things from Nantucket to put on, say, the rescue boats, our rooms inside the ship of the 84 people who will be working on it. So that was interesting that it's not just a name, they try to bring in other things. So I said, oh, you should name one of your rescue boats the Sheila Lucy. And she said, that's a pretty good idea. Or Industry from Absalom, Boston. So that it was a nice conversation. That's all I had for fun comments. My question for you, John, before go to this next agenda item is, from your email and what we've learned, can Melissa and Don now stay in this conversation right now about if they can stay on this conversation?
Yes, I believe they can.
Okay. All right. It's kind of a weird question, but I had to ask it to be able to know.
Right. So did you want me to just go through where we are
Yes,
with this?
please, John.
I know that you had an updated packet. I did hear back from the State Ethics Commission, their Assistant General Counsel, and he basically concurred in the legal conclusions that were included in my detailed email, which I had sent to him, and we had talked about this at the last meeting that I attended. So essentially, I think the board can now proceed with appointments to the short-term rental work group, provided that there are certain steps that we take to ensure that the conflict is not going to become an issue. As you recall, there were 4 categories of conflicts that we had identified. One is if a member of the work group actually has a short-term rental that they operate. And we had indicated that because short-term rentals make up approximately 14% of all residential units on the island, and that's the so-called 10% rule would allow them to participate as long as they filed a disclosure. We also recommended that the sort of as a belt and suspenders, the Board of Selectmen could make a determination that the financial interest is not so substantial as to affect the integrity of the services expected. The same is true with respect to any member of the work group who might abut a property where there's a short-term rental. And quite astonishing, I thought, was that 51% of all properties on Nantucket abut a short-term rental. And again, so the same procedures would be in place. We also talked about in our email the public advocacy groups on both sides of this issues, and we had indicated we thought that they would be able to participate, would be able to participate on the work group, because they're not business organizations as that term is defined in the conflict of interest law. And so that leaves the issue of a work group member who either is engaged in the business of short-term rental operations, either as a property manager or a real estate agent. And that also applies to any individual whose employer is in that business. And this is the one area that gets a little bit sticky. And the board could potentially make a determination that the financial interest is not so substantial as to affect the integrity of the services. In other words, the so-called selectman's exemption. But I think you need to be careful with that in terms of the potential precedent that may create in the future. Maybe not so much specifically with regard to short-term rentals, but just other kinds of conflicts that may come up. So the board's going to have to make a decision there whether you want to you want to appoint anybody to the committee that would otherwise really have a financial interest, a prohibited financial interest without that exemption. And the 10% rule would not apply in that circumstance. So that leaves the question of Melissa and Dawn, whether or not they intend to participate in the appointment process. And I want to read just very briefly what Attorney McDonald said to me. I had sent an email, which is in your packet, that describes selectmen 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and each of you have sort of a different circumstance. Select board members 1 and 2 were specifically for Melissa and Dawn. And he said they may have an issue under Section 19 in appointing the members of the work group, depending on what the appointment process will look like. For example, if the select board intends on interviewing applicants, the board may be in a position to ascertain the applicant's opinions on the matter of short-term rentals, which may raise an issue under Section 19, particularly if any of the applicants voice strong opinions on the underlying short-term rental issue. However, if the work group member selection process will not be in depth, for example, applicants may apply and simply get appointed without much of a process or deep dive into their thought processes, then there would likely not be an issue under Section 19. Again, this is for Melissa and Dawn. I believe, and then of course he had to point out I made a typographical error in my email, but I can take that part. So the question becomes, if Dawn and Melissa would like to participate in the appointment process, it's going to be an issue if the board wants to interview the applicants and, inquire of their, in terms of their opinions about short-term rentals. I think that would create a Section 19 problem for both Melissa and Dawn.
John, what do you think about if it was just an application and there was some kind of question on the application of why you want to be part of this work group? Is that similar?
Yes, I think it would be. I think what Attorney McDonald was getting at is if there's too much information provided by the applicants, either in a questionnaire or during an interview, that would reveal their position on how they view short-term rentals, that would create a potential Section 19 issue for the 2 selectmen I mentioned.
Dawn?
Well, John, if we followed sort of the same application process as we do for the appointments we did tonight, I mean, the form that they fill out does talk about why they want to do it. And then we always invite them to come and speak, which they could say anything that would reveal their feelings, not to mention the fact that this is Nantucket and we know who everybody is and probably already know how they feel about it. So I think that it gets pretty sticky, unfortunately, because I think that it leaves us at a bit of a disadvantage to only have 3 members able to participate in the appointment process. But I'm worried about the legality.
Well, we can also hold off on that decision, Dawn, until you have those applications in front of you. And if, we can look at the questions and the answers and then make a more informed judgment about whether you and Melissa should recuse or not.
John, what about a disclosure? Is that going to be similar? Someone discloses that they own a short-term rental or a butt or part of an advocacy group. Is that too much information for this, what we're talking about now with Dawn and Melissa, to be able to vote?
I hesitate to just give a blanket answer on that. Jason, again, I think we need to see what is disclosed, what information is submitted with the application, and then make an informed judgment. And by the way, before I would recommend to the select board that they made that section 19, provided that section 19 exemption, I think you should wait until you have actual applicants in front of you and we have the facts of what their potential involvement in the short-term rental industry might be before you vote any kind of an exemption for anybody. So my recommendation is you proceed with the application process now. I believe there was going to be an advertisement published that the work group was being formed. I know that you had discussed, although I don't think you finalized your thoughts on what the makeup of the work group would be, but I think you can proceed with that. Invite applicants, see what the applications say, where these individuals, what interests these individuals might have, and then we can make a very specific judgment about whether Melissa and Dawn should recuse from the interview process and the appointment process, and then deal with exemptions once you know the applicants and the interests that they may have.
Brooke?
So John, we could do a very specific questionnaire for this application process that would ask people if they fall into any of these other categories that would require a disclosure. Is that
Yes.
reasonable?
Yes.
And I think from a thought process about what representation we want to have on this work group that I've been thinking about is people's relationship or lack thereof to short-term rentals. To me is important just in terms of having representative voices on the group and a balance of points of view to the best of our ability. And so to me, it's important that we have a fairly robust questionnaire that makes sense in terms of finding the constituencies and make sure that they're well represented. Obviously, there's a lot of different divisions on how people relate to short-term rental. We probably can't split it too many ways with the number of seats we have, but to have a sense of that balance and the community feeling that there's a good balance of people's relationships to short-term rentals so that community members can look at this group and feel as though maybe their circumstances represented in this group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's similar. I was going to say it needs to be a fair cross-section. And how do you find that unless you really dig into it a little bit? And I think Dawn is right. That'll be difficult to do without asking. We can guess, but I think people have to realize that they're at risk. You know, any of us potentially in this, I think this is going to get litigated by someone for some reason, or multiple people litigated. So it's really important that we do this carefully and properly. You know, part of me wishes that that the group had been formed and was outside the government to begin with. You know, because this is seeming more complicated than it, you know, kind of needed to be a year or two ago. The other question I had, John, was I haven't read the whole thing, but we got an email and it talked about the 10% rule being based on population, not necessarily on dwellings. And so what is that? You know, is it the year-round population that the 10% should be pegged on, or is it a dwelling issue? You know,
well, it is technically based on population, Matt, but what I would emphasize is that we have the Assistant General Counsel from the State Ethics Commission concurring, in my opinion. So I think that's I think that's really significant, and that's good enough for me. I think if you actually looked at these percentages that are based on properties, that would most likely translate to more than 10% of the population as well. And again, if the select board grants the section 19 exemption, that's really an added layer of protection that there would not be a violation of the conflict of interest law. And, you know, if there is a violation, it's going to be enforced by the State Ethics Commission. So unless the State Ethics Commission comes out with some further guidance based upon the letter that we all received, I would say just let's go forward. Let's accept the fact that the Ethics Commission has said my opinion, that they concur in my opinion, and proceed accordingly.
Good. So have we done the analysis of what it would be if it were based on population? What's the percent? If it's the same, then we're okay. But have we done the work to know what it is?
No.
And, all right. So I think that should, you know, my suggestion is we do that, because that could be one of the things that, you know, people are upset about. And it also could be one of the things that is, you know, is a perception issue. So I think we should do that and talk about that before we finalize this myself. And the other point is, the key is going to be who's the moderator and who is bringing the industry knowledge, the options, the solutions to this group. You know, if we have a moderator, and I've said this before, if we have a moderator who's there, that's just the quote unquote moderator, and they're taking the information from the group, it's only going to be as good as the information from the group. So I think that, you know, the details are going to matter, you know, to find a solution. The details are going to matter on making sure that we have full information and that we've got the expertise to go down any rabbit holes that show up.
So on that, and by moderator, do you mean facilitator?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. So I put out an email to some other town managers to see if anybody had any ideas about a facilitator for this, and I got several responses back, and I reviewed those with the chair and vice chair earlier today. I do need to review them with you, John. And a local individual has also been in contact with us. So I was going to, the advice I got was just give us 3 names. So I'm working through those names. All of them either have a legal background or a municipal background, just about all of them, and facilitation background. I don't know that any of them have specific experience with how short-term rentals work, but I think that's not probably too hard to figure out. And the issues that come up, I think they'd all be capable of sorting through. And I don't know that they would provide specific recommendations, because I think that's the role of the work group. But I think they would be, any one of them probably would be good facilitators and can navigate the, trickiness of a municipality and different interests.
Anybody else? John?
I should add, I have heard fairly definitively from some of you and others that no one seems to really want to have a local person be the facilitator. They'd rather have someone without any local ties whatsoever.
I think that was my suggestion for our first look, if we can find someone. If we can't find anybody off island, then I might not have a choice, but would everybody agree with what Libby's saying?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
That's my preference.
Yeah, I'm worried about bias.
And again, I think
there
there are consulting groups, there are people that have seen how other places have done it and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and could bring different suggestions based on how we are. And I think, you know, what we're experiencing and what we have going on, I think that that's crucial. And I don't know how to put that in there. You know, I was hoping we'd have someone with both, but if they're going to have legal, then who's going to provide, you know, fact check the stuff that individuals on the group bring, or who's going to provide that information? You know, I know there's like Granicus and there's different people that do this for municipalities, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's places that have dealt with this, you know, as Jamie Howarth said at town meeting. So I think that would be great to find someone who has expertise in that realm to help the facilitator, would help the committee. Otherwise, I think we could be repeating sort of what's been happening here all along, which is sort of everyone arguing with each other and arguing their points.
So we are looking at Granicus as a firm to help initially anyway, manage the program. They certainly know the ins and outs of that. They could certainly be invited to the meetings or a meeting or however many to review their expertise and knowledge about how this works, but I don't think they would be the facilitator of it.
No, yeah. I think, Matt, you were saying like it could be two, a facilitator and someone else, maybe a consultant or a granicus to help with kind of the fact side and the experience side. Yep. I think it's what you were saying, Matt.
Yeah,
Or a
and what
possibility.
have other people done? What, how many, what percentage of their community had this? What, how have they dealt with it? Have they done it by, by area? Have they done it by this? What worked? What didn't? Which places are similar to us? And, how did they handle it and did it work? And so those types of things, if you brought that, to sort of the island right now, I think, people would all have opinions about it, but I don't know that there's a lot of people who have read a lot about it, have really studied it. We need someone has to be here that's, at least one person that's studied it. So.
I think based on what I'm hearing from you, Matt, on that, I mean, we're finding out there's a number of firms that help manage municipal programs, but Granicus is the one that we've been talking to, and I think we are actually working on bringing you a contract so that they can start getting to work on the prep that's going to be needed for the certification program with respect to the regulations, which sidebar is a different issue. But Roberto, myself, town council, Andrew have been, we need to have a meeting to finalize the regulations that will go to you all and the Board of Health. And I think they're pretty much what was in Article 39. I don't think there's going to be too much change from that, but we need to get those in place because that's going to be the basis for what Granicus will, or whoever, but probably Granicus, will put in place for us. But I mean, I think they would be able to provide that information that you're asking about. They have so far.
Brooke and then Melissa.
Yeah, so for me, the important things here are technical expertise, modes of analysis, particularly analysis as it relates to impact, kind of, because I think that's really the question, like what is the impact of the short-term rental business on Nantucket, both from a positive economic view and from a perspective of, neighborhoods, quality of life, housing, all of these questions. And so bringing someone who has a lot of technical expertise to help us understand how to even analyze that in a way that people can agree upon what the data says, to me is going to be a really critical part of this process. So to make sure we have funding for that kind of expertise is going to be really important.
Melissa.
Thanks, Jason. I agree with you, Brooke. And I think one of the most important starting points is going to be getting consensus among the work group members about what problem is it that we're solving, that we're together to solve. I think there's a lot of different solutions that have been discussed that are all addressing very different issues. And so there's got to be some consensus on exactly what that is. And that may need to happen first before we can bring experts in to help us craft whatever this policy is going to be. Because I think without that definitive question or two or statement or two, we might just be going in circles. So we've got to get to some consensus about what problem is it that we're trying to solve as we meet.
And if you don't mind, just I'll phrase it. It's not just problems we're trying to solve, but what positive things we're trying to protect. And I want to be clear that we need to do both, because we do rely on the short-term rental industry. Our seasonal economy relies on it. And I just want to really understand what the big picture is, to know what it is what the impact of what we do to the best of our ability will be.
Yeah. And so to further my thought, I think that it may not be as important to have experts lined up at the beginning, but as we work with a facilitator and the questions beget questions, that's when we may need to pull in some various experts to help analyze impact. So what would be the impact if, say, we restricted this particular way? And I'm not even going to suggest what that might be, but if we came up with a restriction, we would want some analysis of what that impact would look like, both positive and negative. But that's when I think we can pull those experts in to help. They may not need to be there day one. So I don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good and to get this off the ground. And I think I'm happy to talk with the town manager and John directly, if that's more appropriate. But though we can sit on, or to some degree, we're confident that Don and I can stay on the appointing committee, I think there's further questions I have about, say, when these regulations come before the Board of Health or the Select Board for conversation. Where can we be and where can we weigh in on that? As the work group gets to work, can we make comment? Certainly we can as private citizens, but how can we participate in this process and what are those limitations? So I think that would go a long way to helping me understand what my role is as a select board member in this process. And we don't have to have that answer tonight, but I think I'm trying to understand, what this all means. But it's really nice to be here at the table with you all, even having the ability to talk about it.
And I'm back to, it's how you, if you frame the question too narrowly and in the, rush to achieve something, we may not be able to go down the rabbit holes you're talking about. And so that's where I get a little hesitant about what are we trying to answer, because there are certain different personalities. There's some personalities just go right to that and they stick on that and that's what they're doing. And these other things come up and they go, nope, I can't do that.
Yeah.
There's other personalities like me who get pulled into all the different details all over the place.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you've got the ability to deal with kind of both aspects to make sure there's things we probably haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
That are going to come out of this that need to be addressed.
I was just going to add that it may be the reality that this is longer than just getting something in front of town meeting for 2023, that there may be a rabbit hole and we're looking at subsequent policies or regulation recommendations in subsequent years. It may be too complex to solve with one warrant article, which I think is what we've been seeing at town meeting, is that there is not one easy solution. Otherwise, I think the community would have found it by now. So I think having a facilitator is the most key hired personnel to have at the start, and a good application process for the committee. And once we get that off the ground, I think we just have to see where the process takes us. And if we have one goal, it may be helpful for our committee to have one goal to present one idea to town meeting. I mean, it doesn't have to be a stated goal, but it's like, is that what we're trying to accomplish in this work group, is to bring something to town meeting? And it may not be a perfect solution, but it may be a step in the right direction. And once we can identify what those issues are and demonstrate we're working towards solution, I think that will go a long way to appeasing everybody and knowing that we have Nantucket's whole best interest in mind.
Thank you, Melissa. Well said. Question for, I guess, this board, John, maybe Libby with the work group. Who decides on what the application will ask for? And then which disclosure are we going to use? Will that come from John? Does he have a standard one, or is there?
Well, I think what John said, and John, I don't want to put words in your mouth, was that it depends on what the applicant's potential conflicts are as to what the disclosure might be. So as far as who's going to write up this application, I guess town admin can work with John on coming up with something. We can send it around to you all, see if that's sufficient for you, and maybe approve it at a meeting. But in the meantime, as far as how this is going to progress from here, now that it's kind of clear to get the work group going, my most recent understanding, and maybe this isn't correct, is that we have sent a proposed framework that that the pre-work group worked on to the select board, the finance committee, and the planning board. And I think I only am aware of a conversation that the select board has had about it. Not sure if it's on the FinCom agenda. They have a meeting next week. But I think we're waiting for some planning board comments, and they may have not done that yet in anticipation of waiting on this ruling. So I guess I should probably remind those two groups to get their comments back to us for maybe our next meeting. And I think you all did, I can't remember what you did with it. Did you sign off on it? I don't remember.
My recollection is we basically stopped because of this question. And the framework, the pre-group, the last charge was that the three boards would review the proposed membership and discuss the objective portion. And because that we didn't get to at our meeting of the six of us. And so we were hoping to get some feedback from each of the three contributing boards on what the objectives of the work group are. And I think maybe in some sense I started to phrase that in what I said earlier, in my mind, maybe, if not everybody else's. And so some direction on the objectives, because that group's next meeting will be digging into that in more detail. And we thought we'd want pre-ideas.
It was that on the mission objectives and any other comments?
Yeah.
Like, for example, what I was going to ask is everybody okay with not having a select board member on there? I suggested that, those type of things. Any other comments we bring back to the pre-group?
And one comment I made was about historical preservation. And if we do make changes or, that ends up targeting sort of all the historic buildings downtown, then we will have done a bad thing to the island. If more of them are gutted and bathrooms are, added and it's all one bedroom, one bath, and we lose that historic, integrity of the interior of the remaining buildings, we will have done a bad thing. It would be inadvertent. We wouldn't do it on purpose, but if the incentives that we set up are that, like we say, oh, it's okay in downtown and this place and it's not okay here or whatever, we could be doing something really negative for the long-term health of the island. So I think that has to be, those are the types of things that I hope are, in the consideration.
So to me, there's representation in the group, and then there's input that, from different constituencies that's required. And I would put preservation in with that, obviously municipal finance, impact on short-term rental tax revenue, rooms tax revenue, those kind of things. There's going to be a lot of perspectives that are going to need to be looked at that aren't necessarily going to be seated in the work group, but
That has specialized knowledge that we're going to need.
and I think that's where we ended up with the real estate community when we got the suggestion that folks in the real estate industry couldn't serve. There's going to be an important role for the real estate industry to play, because they have knowledge and information to share, and to make sure that they're invited as presenters to the work group of their data and information and experience, to make sure that's included. And I would also say the Board of Health, because they're going to be charged with, enforcing the regulations and so forth. So there's a lot of different constituencies and perspectives.
Even within the rental, rentals, there's different levels of rentals and different impacts. I had a neighbor near me who has an old house, and they rent it out a little bit in the summer, and it's a pretty small thing. It's been there for like 100 years, and they have just had a real angry renter because of all the work that's being done on the big house that's being changed next to them. And so I'm sure that those types of impacts, they're wondering how are they going to hang on if they have to give back all the rent all summer because of the work next door. So I think that there's, so there's two different cases where people are probably even, both doing the same thing, but doing it at completely different levels. And so how do you factor that in to I don't know, so.
If we could have some draft applications, maybe we get to the pre-work group, maybe we're calling that the pre, and disclosure. I thought I read somewhere where the disclosure, the whole process has to be the same for everybody. So if there's one disclosure, and if you don't have anything, then you just put NA all over it. Wouldn't it be one disclosure?
John?
He gave us a couple examples.
Yeah.
Did he? Okay.
Of different, quite slightly different ones.
Okay.
It's those 4 areas that he
Yeah.
mentioned, and
Yeah.
depending on,
Those are the the disclosures under the conflict of interest law. Jason, I sort of drafted them out. I may have to tweak them depending upon who winds up being appointed to the work group. But you can see the basic information that would have to be disclosed. And we will work that into the application form as well.
Okay.
And someone might have to do more than one, I guess, potentially, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
so can I please be clear on next steps here? The framework that you all already looked at and that's already been sent to the planning board and the finance committee will be kind of like reissued and those groups reminded, we need to get your comments on this now that the conflict matter is resolved. We need your comments on membership and work group objectives and any other comments you might have. They get those back by a date certain. We bring it all back to you all. You do a final vote on the mission statement and the membership. And then we start advertising. In the interim, we get the application ready, and that is what people are going to be using to apply. Yes?
That goes, so if we get that ready, does it go to the pre-group and they decide, or is it more select board? That's what I'm trying to,
The application?
just this process. Or the
I
application
think
disclosure.
I think the pre-group is sort of done. at this
I would
point.
like it to go out for comment. I would like to know what the questions are that we're asking.
I don't think the pre-group's
Okay,
done.
Wait.
Yeah, I don't think
okay,
they
hold
are
on.
either.
What questions?
Well, if we're going to do an application
Yeah.
with specific questions, that should go out for comment.
Okay,
I
so so what I was trying to say was the application can be developed between town admin and town council, and we can send that out for review to the 3 groups, the
right.
select board. I mean, I think we wanted to go to FinCom and planning board first and then end up with you all, and then you can take in their comments and add your own, and then the application can be finished off. But I'm not clear on what the role of the pre-group is anymore.
So the pre-group, we met, and then we were going to take everything that we talked about
Yep.
back to our 3 groups. If there was any comments or changes, so let's say the select board said, nope, we want 11 members, then we would send that back to the pre-group.
Okay,
And we would vote on that and send it back to the pre-group. I'm not saying we want 11 members, but as an example. I think the application and the disclosure conflict of interest, if we could do that and send it to the pre-group, 3 groups, then the pre-group, and we could have that system in place, then the pre-group would be done.
I think we should hear back in writing from, we've all talked about our concerns. We haven't finalized them yet, but I would like to know in writing from the Finance Committee whether what was proposed by your group is acceptable. If it isn't, what would they like to see? And I'd like to know the same thing from planning before, because I think we're maybe they're going to be completely fine with it, but isn't that what we sent them?
yeah.
Yeah,
that's what we sent
so let's get that back before and stop jumping to the next things. We're jumping to step 2 and 3, and we haven't had step 1 completed yet.
Well, I'm confused again then, because I thought that we were going to, now that the conflict issue is resolved, we were going to reissue what we already sent to the select board, the FinCom, and the planning board, and ask for their comments, collect the comments, and bring them back to you all. But now maybe I'm hearing, don't bring it back to the board just yet, bring it back to the pre-group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they sort it out and compile the comments and all and bring it back to the board.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. And so the
Okay.
pre-group then comes with a proposed composition of membership, maybe a review of the application, no, that's on us. And then a set of, a charge for the group, I think
Right.
is the way I would describe it.
Membership and a charge.
Which is goals, objectives. But that we would digest the feedback from the 3 boards and in that small group, kind of revise this document and present it back to this board for.
The pre-group will do that.
Yes,
And-
correct.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think the pre-group is going to decide, they're getting all the comments from the 3 groups. They're going to decide, okay, here's how we're going forward.
Yeah.
So we got to give all the comments that we want to see, and they're deciding, right? Town meeting said these 3 groups are coming together to create this, right? We have 2 representatives from all of them, and on we go. So now's our chance to
So
put our
you don't
comments in.
have the pre-groups draft framework in front of you right now. But maybe you should put it on your next agenda
Yep.
to finish that off.
Yep.
Okay.
Melissa?
What membership is this board responsible for appointing?
This board and the other members, the other 4, are going to, once all the applications come in, that group of 9, which we thought was going to be just 7, right, will appoint the 9 members.
Okay. So there is no harm, I think I heard you say this earlier, in tandem to this other process of the sort of solidification of the work group, for the application to be developed so that when we have the formation, the applications can be ready. So I think we're also asking Libby to draft the application
Yes.
with town council.
Yes.
Was that clear to you?
Yes, in conjunction with everything else, yes. But then the application's going to go to the pre-group.
So
That's
maybe
what I
this
thought
is-
I heard.
Maybe this is a question for who's responsible for the final draft of the application? The pre-group?
Well,
or the appointing authority, which is
you,
the select board, 2 members of the planning board and 2 members of the FinCom.
The appointing authority for the work group is the select board. Right? I mean,
no, it's.
I thought the work group would consist of certain people on it, but it's the select board that appoints it.
It's all 3.
It's all 3.
Yeah, it's all 3.
Is that your understanding, John? I don't know how all 3 are going to appoint a work group.
Isn't that the same process as what we did tonight with the planning board? Ballot
I
vote?
guess.
Well,
times
the way it
3.
was written was it would be, the select board and 1 member from planning and 1 member from FinCom. That's what you guys proposed.
But
From the pre-group, that was going to be the selection committee.
That wasn't my motion at town meeting.
I understand, that's what the selection committee is saying, yeah, so I don't know. And this is why we need to hear back from those committees, because they may say, we don't want that, we have 7 members, we all want to vote. And some of this is also why everyone is jockeying, and I think we need to, sort of acknowledge that, and I think we need to, maybe it shouldn't be done through the government. This is too hard. Some of what the hoops we're trying to jump through, knowing that there's going to be challenges to this, legal challenges from either side or from many different sides. I think that we have a hard time, I think, doing this to the letter of the law. And I'd like to know the 10% population and how that's going to impact, and whether there's a complaint about that. There's issues, I think, that we have to be cognizant of and careful of that have been surfaced that I think we're glossing over a little bit.
Brooke, there was correct me if I'm wrong, but because Melissa and Don couldn't vote and be a part of it, it was the 3 of us plus the 2 planning board and 2 FinCom who were going to vote on the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Right, so maybe it's changed, we need to relook at it, and we have all 5. I don't know. But that was my understanding.
I'd like to get an interpretation from town council on what the language of the motion at town meeting,
What we can do underneath that.
what's permitted under that. I mean, the thing that makes sense to me, whether it's correct or not, would be to have the same number of members from each of the 3 named boards. So 3 select board, 3 planning board, 3 FinCom, with equal weight to each board be the appointing authority that determines what the questionnaire is, and that's it. And if we can, or 2, 2, and 2, but equal weight from each board, because the boards have such different numbers of membership. If everybody voted, it wouldn't be equally weighted. So that would be the way I would go, and I would ask for advice from town council on whether a 3-3-3 or a 2-2-2 scenario makes the most sense. And if it's a 2-2-2 scenario, we may be back to the pre-group, because that's what that group is. So,
But then you've got a
You're gonna
political,
want an odd number.
yeah, but then you have a political problem that those 2, our group is fairly split. You know, I would say we're 2 and 2, and Jason's kind of in the middle on this in some ways, and we have different opinions all here. The other 2 groups were not split. You know, they were unanimously in favor of 42, and same with the FinCom. And so if it did become 2-2-2, it's really not a evenly balanced group. Again,
I just have to be clear. There was just an assumption made on how I would vote or support anything, and I have not been able to publicly talk about that. So I want to just make sure that we're clear that my personal feelings on any of the articles presented at town meeting remain with me and my person. I've not had the ability to talk about them publicly.
I apologize for that.
That's okay. That's
assumption.
okay. I just want to make sure we're clear, and then we're not making any assumptions, because this could be dangerous territory to make assumptions in. My belief in how this work group would be formed is that we are empowering a work group made up of planning, finance, and the select board to run this process. And that would include, in my opinion, the appointing authority of its members. I think we need to be clear from town council if that's in fact the case, because then I think even Don and I's ability to appoint those members could be a moot point if we're not in fact on the committee that is making the appointments. We are endorsing that work group to go through this process and determine who the best membership is, and after that, they're going to present to us some solutions. Hopefully 2 or 3 members of this board will be a part of that conversation. So I do think, Brooke, your analysis is correct. We need to know, is it 2 members, 3 members? Don's point that we need an odd is a good one.
that's a good one.
9 does not seem overwhelming to me, and I think would be a fair representation. And I think we could find 3 select board members to serve on that committee without conflict, and take it from there. So I think we have to get a little bit more refinement. I also just want to say it would be fabulous if a non-government agency or 2 could get together and collaborate and go through this process without the loopholes, but I don't think that those 2 sides have been able to come together and meet and get to consensus. And so government has to be the mediator here to get to solution. We hear the public loud and clear. They want some kind of solution to some kind of problem. So we have to identify what that is and present solution.
Jason?
Yeah.
And I might add, the obligation of transparency and conflict of interest in all of these hoops we have to jump in to actually lend credibility to the process, as opposed to it being done in an environment that doesn't have all these rules. This is challenging and it's frustrating, but to me, it's just part of the process, and it's an important part of the process, because what we're doing is we're showing the community that this matters, who has a conflict, what are people's interests, making sure everyone's voices are represented. The fact that we're doing this in a public way is going to help lend credibility to whatever outcome comes from this group. So I'm happy to agonize through this for as long as it takes to get it right.
But maybe in an effort to close out this evening, we could leave with some questions that we need answers to for our next meeting, which would be, what is the, based on the motion made at town meeting, the makeup of this actual work group, not the pre-group group, right? Is it 3 members of planning? Is it 2? Is it up to us to decide? Were there any restrictions made in the
You're
motion?
talking about the
May I?
authority.
Go ahead, John.
So
I'm actually just talking about
the motion at town meeting, which was from Dawn, was to refer Article 42 and 43 to the Select Board, Finance Committee, and Planning Board to constitute a work group to further study. So the size of the work group was not specified in the vote, and there's no detail as to how the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and the Planning Board would get together and come up with an appointing, a group to appoint the members of the work group. So I think that's really something the 3 boards, and in particular the pre-group, should work out amongst themselves.
Yeah, and we have to remember, this was an amendment to Dave Iverson, who was bouncing it to us. So Dave was saying, you know what, it's the select board's responsibility, and Don said, well, okay, let's get everybody involved.
Right.
So, you know, so that was the sequence of this.
So you have a wide discretion here to work with the other 2 boards to come up with a, who's actually going to make the appointments, what representatives from each of the 3 boards are going to be involved, and what is the work group going to look like in terms of membership.
Yeah, well, the membership has already been suggested by the pre-group, and that we need comments from all 3 groups.
Right.
We spent an hour talking about that, so it's not set, but if anybody has any issues, then we could change that. But if the pre-group, if everybody's fine with that, then we just got to figure out that last part, like who's going to appoint. I think we're pretty close on the membership.
Yeah.
Would that then mean, Jason, that the pre-group should convene one more time to discuss?
We are.
Okay, to discuss the appointing.
We need information from each of the 3 entities to say, yes, we like this.
Great.
What about that?
Great.
Okay. Yeah, to make a final recommendation on the makeup, to make the charge, and I would add to determine the appointing authority and process.
Just one last question for you, Jason, to John, if I could. John, if it's decided that the work group, the planning board members, finance committee members, and select board members, if it's recommended that they do the appointing, do they actually have that authority to do that?
So this work group was a creation of town meeting. It's not, there's not a bylaw, there's not a charter provision, there's not a general law that governs. I think that's why I said, Melissa, there's a great deal of flexibility for the 3 boards to get together, decide who the appointing authority is going to be.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, are we good?
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks.
We have a lot of signing, right?